Hello, all you vault dwellers and surfies, and welcome to the Deckumentary Podcast. This episode, we unlock the history vaults for the epic video game series Fallout. I'm your resident deck builder, Stephen Thompson, and with me is our resident Gary, Josh Poole.
Hello. You can't say that about surface people. That's not
Surfies?
Cool. That's not cool anymore.
I'm a surfy.
It's okay. It's your word.
It's our word.
Yeah.
And our special guest, Gary, Jeff McAdam.
Gary.
Gary. This episode, we will be jumping into the deck and facts surrounding the Fallout franchise. But first, some updates. New format. We figured it's about time to get on YouTube, so this will be our first episode on YouTube. We are still going to be in an audio-only format, if you prefer that. Excuse me. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
I love how just as you were saying that, you were gesturing with your hand at your computer.
Yeah,
this is an audio-only format, and it's going to be here.
Right here. It's in the computer. And I don't know how we're going to do it yet, but I think I'm going to start bringing the old episodes over to video. I do want to try to differentiate it somehow from new things, because we're going to be talking, hey, this happens in a year from now. It's like, well, that happened like...
Don't call it a format, call it a 3-mat, because it's like one less.
No, Fallout 3 mat.
Yeah.
Like a Fallout 3 play mat.
Fallout format?
Here we go. We're starting strong here.
Not my best work.
If you're a totally new listener or watcher, on the show, we discuss a topic for which we've also built a Magic the Gathering Commander deck. This episode, of course, diving into the Fallout series. We should say there will be spoilers.
Oh, so many.
For the games, we've all watched all episodes.
We've all watched the
series.
show. I don't think we're going to talk as much about the show.
Try to keep... The
No,
show did just come out.
Because it's very, very fresh.
Very fresh,
but there's some
but I'm very
comparisons.
excited about it. So
I'm also very excited. I thought it was well done.
Yeah. So, topic briefly, with both the release of the new Amazon show, as we just discussed, as well as Wizards of the Coast having released their 4 pre-constructed decks, we wanted to build our take of a deck using only pre-existing cards, or what I'm calling a we-constructed deck. Like pre-constructed, but we constructed.
Oh, speaking of not our best work.
I thought it was pretty good.
You give it a good run.
A Wecon, you know? You guys play your precons, I'll play my Wecon. That sounds inappropriate somehow. So, man, we're killing it.
Steve got kicked out of the library for playing with his Wecon.
Collectively, we are all big fans of the game series. Myself really only coming on for Fallout 4, although I did watch a roommate of mine.
Yeah.
He played quite a bit of Fallout 3 in New Vegas. Whereas Josh and Jeff, you guys are more rooted in Fallout 3 New Vegas. That's like where the bulk of your play.
Yeah, I played 3 when I was probably a little too young to be playing it, because, when did Fallout 3 came out? In 2008? But I played it originally when it came out in the Xbox 360, and yeah, it was like my first Bethesda game. It was my first sort of foray into like that. I hadn't really played a lot of post-apocalyptic anything at that point, I don't think, or at least not something quite as big and expansive as that.
I had played 1 or 2, and I don't remember which, on the PC a little. And it was one of those, I think I was at a friend's house, or I acquired a copy somehow. It wasn't my copy.
Right.
And I didn't...
You got a bunch of discs.
Yeah. And I didn't get super into it the way that I think I would have. But it was right when it came out, so I was aware of it, and I had friends that were like, these are great games, and I was a big fan of Diablo 1 and 2 around that era, although man. I think those might be like a hair older or newer than, like, Fallout might predate Diablo, but I don't really remember.
Diablo 2 is 99?
That sounds right.
I believe.
Yeah.
Fallout 1 was 97, 98? Ish.
Yeah, I have it down here.
All of that in and around. I do remember that kind of thing coming out, but
97,
the turn-based part threw me off a little. I just found it a little hard.
Yeah,
to wrap my head. I love the aesthetic, especially now looking back. Like just before we started recording, we were watching some footage,
and I through an emulator I found Fallout 1, and I played a little bit of it, and it's especially starting with Fallout 4, going back.
It's
such a different game.
It can be a little tough.
But like Josh, I had played Oblivion, which I think predates Fallout 3, which is a Bethesda game. but Fallout 3 was the sort of first the first Bethesda game that I really sank into, the first Fallout game that I really sank into. And I think that was the same for a lot of people.
Yep. We're not going to touch on. Well, we'll touch on it a little bit because Josh, you haven't. I definitely haven't played any Fallout 76. But Jeff, you have.
I have.
I played maybe an hour.
Okay.
Like when it came out, I think I played a little bit of it.
I have a story of exactly when I quit playing.
Perfect. Well, okay, so we will be touching on that. So without further ado, let's jump into the deck. So the commanders for the deck are Yoshimaru, Ever Faithful, representing you as the player, or the Vault Dweller for the most part. Sometimes Fallout 3, you're not. Is that
You're
the
a
only
Vault
one?
Dweller? No, you're
Or sorry, not
New
Fallout 3.
Vegas.
New Vegas, you're not.
New Vegas, you're a courier.
You're a surf.
Yeah, it's 2 in New Vegas are the ones you don't play Vault Dweller.
Two.
Two,
Oh,
you're
right.
a descendant.
You're a
of.
descendant of the, but you're
That's
not.
right, but you're from
you're
Arroyo.
the
You're from
surface.
Yeah, that's right. And then Yoshimaru is a partner commander, so partnered with Rograk, son of Roga, which is representing Dogmeat, which is Dogmeat has been, I
think he's in
believe,
all
in
of the
every
games.
main. I mean, it's not the same dog, but so there are other partner commanders or partner legendaries in the deck, so you can switch them out. Which kind of emulates the whole companion aspect of it, which is a fairly long-running trend through the games. And now, Josh, you played the deck a little bit. So did I. But what were your thoughts on the deck?
Deck is really fun, incredibly aggressive,
Very quick.
very fast.
Yeah.
There's,
So Roga, I should say for you, people that don't know, Yoshimaru is 1 mana. Yeah, Jeff does not know. He is a 1 mana 1/1.
We should probably say that I am the resident non-magic
Totally, that's a good point.
player. So this is all I'm here as a.
You're the Fallout expert.
I wouldn't even call myself a Fallout expert, but definitely I'm a guy who knows some Fallout and loves some Fallout, and is aware of magic. But I mean, you
did
this
bring your Fallout
my
shoes,
Fallout sneakers,
your
my
suede
Vault 101 suede blue
blue
suede
and yellow
shoes, yeah.
trim. Those are amazing shoes. But yeah, so Yoshimaru, every time a legendary permanent enters the battlefield, it gets a +1/+1 counter. So turn 2, it's pretty easy to have like a 5/5 creature doing 5 damage to somebody.
Yeah, there
It's very fast.
is a perfect setup in the deck if you get it just right, where you can kill someone on turn 3. If
Turn
you get the
3
right,
or 4, yeah.
you can get the right specific couple things in a row. And the couple games I played, I didn't kill someone on turn 3, but very close.
I think by turn 4, you're very easily the arch enemy at the table.
I think on turn 4 or 5, I think I had killed someone, and I was very nearly killing someone else.
Yeah, it's a dangerous deck. It burns out quick, so that's the kind of hole in the deck, is that like you're very front loaded. You're just like go, and then if somebody stops you a couple times, gets rid of your commander, you're kind of in a tough spot.
In terms of the factions in the world of Fallout,
Yeah.
Which faction would have created this deck? Like, is this like a Brotherhood of Steel or an Enclave, or is this like a?
Oh, this is Caesar's.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I guess because it's combat.
It's fast. It's aggressive. They storm you down, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what
Cool.
Legion just brings them to more numbers.
On that point, so each of not all the factions, but each of the main factions are represented by planeswalkers, so they have like different abilities, and kind of like as you're going through the game, you're deciding which faction to side more with. So on planeswalkers, they usually have like a plus ability, and then their ultimate. So it's like if you get to the ultimate, you've decided that's your faction kind of thing. That's the flavor I was going for.
You have hit max rep.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, strategies of the deck are legendary matters because every, other than some of the lands, every card is a legendary card. It does have its pitfalls. There's like very little. There's no instance. There's one sorcery, and everything else is.
Yeah, it definitely getting the right lands was very difficult because
you have to have the white one on turn 1.
So many legendary lands are slow, and if you don't get the right ones,
or colorless.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially get your commander out on turn 1 and just strike as fast as possible. The other side of it too is in the games, you're constantly leveling up, you're upping your skills. So it's as you find this new legendary location or this person or this artifact, you're leveling up, so you're getting those +1/+1 counters. So that was kind of the idea of the gameplay of the deck.
Also, and you get to pilot a dog in the deck. You are a big dog, and you get to kill people with a big dog.
Yeah, you're just a giant. It's like what
Shiba
Inu is, which is depicted on the card itself. So I figure best place to start now, getting into the facts, is the beginning. So the section 1 I call not special from the start. Fallout 1 and Interplay. So prior to October 1997 release of Fallout, Interplay was known for its success with other RPG games like the Bard's Tale and Wasteland, among many others. I played a bit of Wasteland through, again, an online emulator. The emulator was pretty crap, but it's also a tough game now to play.
Go back,
especially Wasteland, right? Like the Fallout 1 and 2 are like modern enough that although there's some stuff getting used to, it's still like, oh, this is the game. Whereas Wasteland's like that.
Have you guys played?
I watched quite a bit of it. I watched an hour or two of it just to familiarize myself, and it's
I've seen it. I'm sort of familiar, and you could see where the groundwork is being laid for.
Well, I think I was watching a couple documentaries on this, and there is a similar feel to Fallout 1, but the creators have said that it wasn't made as a successor. They did pull ideas from it, but they were actually excuse me. It was around when Mad Max came out, and so they were really
Beyond
into that.
Thunderdome?
Maybe it was Beyond Thunderdome. I can't remember which of them.
That would have been the one like in the early 90s with like Tina Turner.
Yeah, it would have been the mid 90s, I guess, because it came out in October 97. So yeah, something. But anyways, they were fascinated.
Well, yeah, that was the most recent of those.
And you can very easily see the similarities in that kind of world, I think. Have you guys heard the original pitch for Fallout?
No.
Okay, I have notes on it. It's pretty amazing. There's actually a documentary with the 3 creators talking about the building of the game, and that's in there, and I'll link that in the show notes as well. But essentially, in the original pitch, your girlfriend gets kidnapped, and while searching for her, you go down, and in the basement of her house, you find a statue. And you're investigating it, and a bunch of cultists attack you and take you back to their lair, and they send you back in time. I don't know why. This is the pitch. I don't know. And when you get back in time, this part they didn't explain, you're like primeval world, totally naked. I don't know why you're totally naked. Maybe the cultists.
Terminator time travel rules. You can't.
Oh yeah, because you can't bring it back.
You can't send non-organic material through, I guess.
But you find a crashed spaceship, and it's locked. And nearby, there's a monkey, and the monkey has a key for the spaceship. You have to kill the monkey to get the key, and then you enter the ship. The only thing in there for clothing is superconducting underwear. It's relevant. And then the ship takes you to a totally different world, which is ruled by an evil wizard. And the reason he rules is because he can control lightning. But it has no effect on you because you have the superconducting underwear. And then you defeat him. Then another wizard sends you back to the future. But because you killed the monkey that was the progenitor
of the human race,
evolution into human race, everybody is anthropomorphic dinosaurs now. They're all like reptile people.
So the 1994 Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah,
rules,
kind of.
basically.
Yeah, basically.
It's very funny hearing you explain it, because this is very like Space Quest, like very inspired by like the point and click RPGs.
I've never played it. Space Quest?
Is that what it's called? My
Yeah.
mistake. Yeah,
Yeah.
Like
So there was like King's Quest and then Police Quest and Space Quest, and that was.
And it's in that same like really absurd, goofy little point and click that these guys all played. Obviously,
yeah, it reminds me of, and it's
by
probably a future iteration of it, but like Monkey Island.
Yeah,
all same guys, right?
Monkey
also
Island
Sierra?
was Monkey Island was like the Lucas art.
Yes, all the same.
Right,
but yeah.
I love those games. Yeah. Anyways, long story short, you end up getting back, figuring out the evolution thing and fixing that. And when you travel correctly back to the future, you were the statue. Do 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 do.
And that's the origins of Fallout.
What does that have to do with Fallout?
I don't know. So that was this is the original pitch.
Sure. Okay.
That was Fallout 1, the original pitch.
And they're like, okay, I got some notes.
Yes, but they obviously they decided to go with the Mad Max aesthetic.
Right. I like that even from the get-go, because this is one thing that persists, I think, in all of the games in a little bit, is a sort of Lovecraftian moment. There's always something in the games that's like
A little bit of cosmic horror.
yeah, just a nod to some sort of Cthulhu-ish kind of thing, like an elder god. There's nods to like the Dunwich building in Fallout 3, then the Dunwich borers in Fallout 4.
Amazing.
And they're like, that's the mine that's owned by the Dunwich building. And then like that plays in with like a bunch of, so like that sort of Lovecraftian horror obviously was at the heart of a lot of that, what sort of inspired them. And like it went from this like bizarre space wizard story with, time traveling and monkeys and dinosaur people to a post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear war kind of thing. And you could still have a little seed of that.
Totally. Yeah, no, they do show that in pretty well. And lots of, they also touch on like alien stuff.
Right.
I think we were talking about before recording, we were talking about how there's seems to be aliens in kind of every
the alien
iteration
blaster, the Zeta.
Yes.
Zeta.
Mothership Zeta.
And then is
not
it
a great DLC.
Is it 3 or New Vegas? There's a DLC about the Hubologists. It's like a cult of alien worshipping. They're essentially a nod to
that's a quest in New Vegas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you go to the ghouls who like.
No, there's that one where you send the ghouls into space. But no, there's a different one.
There's a separate one.
They're called the Hubologists.
That sounds really
it's a nod to Scientology.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I forget what game it's from.
It's either 3
I
or
think it might be New Vegas because the hub is also a city on the West Coast.
Okay.
Right.
Could be that.
That's from, I think, 2? Fallout 2 is like 1 or 2 centers around the hub. It's
Gotcha.
like a main settlement on the west.
So, so running off the success of, as we said, Wasteland, they decided to create a new game that had a similar feel but would integrate, originally, the idea was to integrate GURPS, or the Generic Universal Role-Playing System, which was a role-playing system, obviously, developed by Steve Jackson. Yeah. And actually, I have some, they're in the bookshelf there, but some Choose Your Own Adventure books that were written by Steve Jackson and another guy.
Yeah, yeah. I played those. Although the ones that you actually have to you have like a stats page at the back.
Dice, and on the bottoms of if you don't have dice on the bottoms of the page, there's random dice numbers, so you can just flip to a random if you have a dice roll.
Awesome.
I remember because I was in high school. There were a few of us that were curious about Dungeons and Dragons, but none of us knew somebody that actually played it to teach us, and it was a very nowhere near as accessible as it is now. Kind of endeavor. Now there's a million YouTube channels and you can watch playthroughs and even just the books are written in a more accessible way. But they were dense. I had the player's guide for maybe AD&D 2 or something, and it's hard if you don't know where to start with any of this.
It's so hard.
It's tough.
Even 4th edition was a little bit, and that was
for sure.
That wasn't that long ago.
But the
GURPS,
those Steve Jackson books.
Oh yeah.
Were a great way of kind of I've got my whole stats. It was terrible because it's that paperback quality paper.
Totally. Yeah.
And you're writing and erasing and writing, and I put holes in those pages just trying to erase the stats and stuff.
Yeah, I've got 20 of them, maybe not quite that many, but quite a bit of them.
Yeah, those are great.
So the idea was,
I was doing cool things in high school.
Yeah, super cool guy.
Yeah.
Now I don't personally know too much about GURPS other than the idea of it. Do you guys know much about
a little bit?
the
I
GURPS
think
system?
it was just that it was a framework that you could put whatever setting or story that you wanted on top of it, right?
Yeah,
that
it
was the sort of generic universal part of it.
It was designed, as in the name, generic universal. It was because a lot of the role-playing games that existed at the time were ultra-specific. D&D and like many of the others were like they were made for one setting and one, like, you were playing that game. Whereas there didn't exist. There was a few at the time that existed that were more generic, but this was a bit like this could be applicable for literally anything. It was just like you play a character. It's a point buy system, so you have 4 stats. You buy into those stats. You buy your skills.
So would you say, I mean, D&D's come a long way. It used to be very specific with what you were doing. And now 5th edition,
it can be tooled into anything. Right?
It's a bit more simple.
It can, and there was some work in, I want to say 4th edition with what they call the D20 system, that was trying to kind of do that,
Simplify.
like D20 modern and D20 future, and like where there was sort of these, the core mechanics were the same, but like the stats were wildly different, and the skills were wildly different. But it was kind of the opposite of being universal. It was like it was like they were specific, but for a sort of okay, look, this is a general 20th or 21st century setting versus this is a sort of future cyberpunky kind of setting, and then a whole list of skills for that. But they had those sort of,
it's like, how do I use my internet hacking skill with this bow and arrow?
Yeah, like they were sort of general, but they were also still opinionated about like kind of the world, but they were sort of a bit more designed for that. But yeah, GURPS, and even with the GURPS, like there are multiple GURPS flavors. Yeah, so I think they have a bunch of like GURPS space and stuff like that, where there's the GURPS engine underneath it, but then also additional stuff for space settings and space weapons and flying spaceships and that kind of stuff. So.
Now, so Steve Jackson, the creator of GURPS, he was on board for the first bit. So there were a couple things that kind of split. So it was Black Isle Games. They were Black Isle Games, right?
Yes, yeah, they were Black Isle. Yeah, Interplay brought them on to work on the Fallout series. They were Black Isle.
So Black Isle and Steve Jackson, they were in it together, but then 2 things. So Steve Jackson hated Vault Boy.
Such a funny thing to get
which is such a random. They were like, no, it's kind of like you're Michelin tire guy or you're Mr. Clean, but no, he just hated it.
Well, and it's funny because I think Vault Boy embodies one of the core things that I love about the world, which is this juxtaposition of that post World War II idealism, and kind of Cold War era like propaganda and like everything's gonna be okay, and
totally.
like really downplaying the negative effects of any of the science or nuclear stuff that's happening. I'm like, that's okay, you'll just grow another limb, like really that know, and taking from those sort of safety videos from the 50s, and they do that so well. And Vault Boy is really the epitome of that. The little blonde-haired guy just with like a little thumbs up that's plastered all over everything, and then the people in the vault buy into that vibe,
and
that kind of stuff.
With the series too, how they kind of look at the creation of Vault Boy a bit. And there's also the rule of thumb of the size of the blast if it's smaller than your thumb.
I think has been largely discredited.
There's no basis in,
because honestly, I think if it's far enough away that you can block it out
with your thumb,
you can still have tons of negative effects. From
and
that.
There's just, I think,
and if you're like, oh, I'm too close, you can't do anything about it.
What if you just have a really,
what does it matter?
What if you
it's
just
like, wait, where's my thumb?
What if you have a really fat thumb?
Oh,
or thin thumb?
What if you got stung by a bee and it was all swollen?
Oh, see, this is why it just doesn't work as a scientific method. That aside, that wasn't the kind of the main kicker on why they parted ways. The big one was, if you guys have seen, you guys, the listeners, watchers, have seen the intro to Fallout 1, there is, and it's kind of paying a dark homage to an actual video or photos, I think, of
from Vietnam.
There is a a shot in the trailer of somebody in power armor executing somebody that's on their knees
During
on the ground.
the annexation of Canada, I believe is what it is.
Is that? Or
It's one of the before the bombs fell, but it's sort of during that war
up in
invasion
Alaska.
kinda
And I think it's when they
either
were taking over Canada.
Operational
Maybe, yeah.
Anchorage or
Yeah.
the annexation of Canada during that era. Yeah.
And Steve Jackson was like, no, absolutely not. So, as the title of this section kind of alludes to,
Not so
special from the start, they were forced to create their own system. Interplay and Black Isle, there it is in my notes. They needed to create their own system after developing. So they were working with GURPS for 2.5 years. And
Wow.
now all of a sudden they had to
They're
kinda-
like, yeah. And there's a lot of, like, it's kind of just GURPS with different names.
a little, yeah, I think
Right.
a little bit. Well, and speaking of different names, originally, so they had the 7 skills that we now know as special, but they were calling it at first A-slips. A-slips.
So funny. Just
And
no
nobody put the
moved the letters
figured out that the
around.
letters actually, and somebody actually, this is again in that video with the interview with the 3 creators or 3 heads of the teams. Somebody was like, it actually spells special, right? And the guy was like, but I kind of like A-slips.
Can you imagine a little Vault Boy poster with "You're so A-slips"?
Yeah, what's the what would all that little propaganda be? I don't even a whole different
Nothing.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's like such a huge, and again, back to your point of like this like magical world, this fake magical world. It's like everything's special, everything's great.
Yeah, and there is a Cold War, especially NASA loves acronyms, but like the military, the American military, lots of acronyms for things, and so things like the GOAT, which is one of the first things you do in Fallout 3, as a child in the sort of beginning of Fallout 3, you are going through a few little milestone moments in your life growing up, and the GOAT is a
General something aptitude test?
Yeah, general occupational aptitude test,
yeah.
something like that,
Yeah.
where it's just one of those standardized tests, but it's how you in the game determine what stats and skills you're going to get.
Oh, it's
And
like
at the
your-
end of
your
it, they
character
let you
building.
just like change it all around, but it basically is like you answer a bunch of questions
Yeah,
that also kind of paint the picture of the world that's out there a little bit
Right.
for you.
right.
And then based on your answers, they give you a set of stats and stuff. So
Right.
like if you're not the kind of person that wants to like worry about what points do I put stuff into,
Right.
this
yeah.
does it for you.
I actually
You could-
I
you could go
remember
and change
watching my roommate playing that game, and I came into the room and he was crawling around as a baby.
I was just about to say the intro of Fallout 3 is very funny because the
Yeah.
game opens with you being
that. You
born.
being born.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're crawling around as a baby and you pick up like a kid's book and it's like full of Vault Boy and it's like
Yeah.
you go on each page and
And it
that's where you
tells you what-
allocate your stats.
Yeah.
But it's like as a baby in this kid's book, like
It's
with
so-
with the thick pages.
It's such an
and all that.
interesting
Very
take
funny.
on that.
But it also
Well,
shows
very
like
cool.
like the propaganda of like all the
Right.
kids it's all Vault Boy. It's
Yeah.
all
Well, especially in the vaults. The vaults are 95% propaganda.
Sure
It's
are.
like
Right.
the
The
thing.
ones where people are living
normal
somewhat
lives.
normal lives.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Which
Getting
is-
into spoiler territory, but not all of the vaults are
Not all of the 122 vaults, I believe.
something
Maybe
like
total-
that.
Maybe
yeah.
like 5 of them are normal.
Yeah, there's like a handful in each
I'm
place.
getting a
that
nod
are-
from Carolyn over
Yeah.
the 122 vaults. So they went from GURPS to A-slips to special being strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. I actually have, so there's in Magic the Gathering, there's background legendary enchantments. It was for D&D. You chose a legendary character and then you paired it with a background. But there are 7 that represent one each. One of them wow. How do I say this? I have 7 of them in the deck. Each one of those representing one of the skills I have previously mentioned.
We
You
got
did
there.
it.
We got
Holy
You
there.
did it.
moly. Fell on my face there. Despite these changes, in the game. This special has been used, as we just kind of mentioned, throughout everything. I'm interested. I'm trying to think if in the series, the show, if they touch on it.
So
at all?
she
They did
mentions in the first episode, she says something about like she's sitting down having an interview in the vault with somebody about like a job,
all of her skills,
all
and
of her
stuff.
skills,
Yeah.
and they are all skills that are like common skills in a lot of the games.
Oh, interesting.
and then and like,
I kind of want to go back and watch and see if each one of them kind of
they kind of do.
correlates
She does
to-
end up using each of those a little bit. And this is one of the things I really liked about the show is there's a real meta layer that if you've played the games, like
Yes. Yeah.
she goes through an arc that is very similar to how like not just the characters in the games go through, but the way the players
Yep.
kind of go through.
I
Of
think that
like,
was
I
kind
don't
of-
really know what's going on
Yeah.
here. And then like, you go to your first town
Getting
and
random side quests.
and these random side quests. And like, there's even a moment where she's got her first little bit of armor after she's
Yeah, the
like killed a
leather-
raider.
Yeah,
and
when
she's
she
got
when
one
she
leather
steps out of
arm.
when
kinda
she steps
thing.
out of the super duper merge, she has
Yeah.
like the exact like leather straps. Like, okay, I see what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
just like these little like sort of getting better weapons and like sort of running into these different things, and it's very much the arc that most players go through when they first play.
I
one of
actually
the games.
thought that. I mean, we're jumping ahead to the show here, but that's fine. I felt like each of the three main characters. So you have Lucy, you have the Ghoul, and you have Max. They all feel, and this is a common thing in many movies when you have multiple main characters. They all embody
a different way of
a different
Approach.
way of the player. So you have Lucy, which is, for me, anyways, the players, a new player playing the game for the first time.
right. I'm
and
I'm
kinda
gonna
going out
do
and
this
seeing
the
it.
way that
Yeah,
I'm sort of
I'm
supposed
going to go out and be a good guy. It's like, oh, but what is good, quote unquote,
Right.
in Fallout? Then you have Max, who is the part of the player that I just want to have the big gun. I want to have that armor. I want to get all that cool
right. I want to
stuff.
max out on Max.
Max. Oh, that's it. Min Max.
Min Max.
He's the Max.
Min Maximus.
He's kind of terrible if he's a min max, but he's not very. He's not super great at it.
Yeah. Well, but that's
He
also
loses almost every fight.
that might also be the like min max is also like they can be like really good at certain things, but
That's
like
fair.
They're
also
min
it's-
on something.
Yeah.
So you have that. Also, I was watching an interview with the director and somebody from Bethesda talking about the series, and I believe it was the director was talking about how Max, he's also his experience with the Brotherhood is also kind of ours, where when you see the Brotherhood at first, you're like, oh, these armored guys with these Gatling guns, and man, those guys are awesome. And then the more you get to know them, you're like, are they awesome?
yeah, are we the
I
bad
don't
guys kind of
know.
moment? Yeah.
And then you have the Ghoul, or Roy. I
Nope.
think it's
Coop.
Is it Coop?
Cooper Howard,
Cooper. Yeah, okay, Coop. Weird.
but they call him the Ghoul when he's the Ghoul,
yeah,
but
yeah,
they call
the
him
Ghoul.
Coop when he's
But
Yeah,
he,
in
for me
flashbacks.
anyways, he's like kind of how I want to be. I want this like lone wanderer that can take everybody out in vats and just like that's
Totally.
my like
and you can only really get to that point after you've played the game a bunch.
which he has. He's
Which he
200
has.
years
I mean,
old.
Absolutely.
he is like he is the high level player because when he shoots people, they explode.
They
Which,
do.
Right.
They
which is-
really do.
That was one of my favorite little nods of the show. Is that every time he shoots someone, they just explode.
They just
which is
explode,
how it
yeah.
works in
I
the
want to
game.
figure out
So-
where to get his gun.
The boom bullets.
Was
Yeah, they're
yeah,
massive. Yeah.
was talking about just what would we like to see in a
Fallout 5.
a Fallout. Well, honestly, we'll probably get Fallout Season 5 before we get Fallout 5 because it's going to be
Yeah.
a minute.
Well, they have quoted they're going to finish the next
finish
Oblivion-
Elder
or
Scrolls 6 and then
work on 5.
and work on 5. So yeah, great eventually, but no, just in a future season, one of the things because we didn't spoilers for the show.
This is going to be sprinkled throughout.
They're going to be sprinkled throughout, but just like I'm just going to talk about this is recent enough that maybe people still want to watch the show. You should just pause and watch the show and then come back. But we don't see a few things in the show like super mutants. There's a nod to them. There's a wanted poster in the background that
You
has a
see
super
the
mutant.
arm
and you see the arm at the
on the
beginning.
gurney.
And then Death Claws.
There's skulls of those.
Skulls of those.
are- yeah.
I like save
like
save it for future seasons.
The
Absolutely.
final scene, right? You see a skull of a Deathclaw.
Yeah, because he's heading towards the desert and stuff.
Yeah.
But the Mysterious Stranger is a
Oh.
perk that you can take
Yes.
where just randomly a dude in like a trench coat and a hat shows up and saves the day every once in a while.
Yeah.
And it's part of the sort of luck skill tree.
Yep.
It's a luck based perk. But I would love to see an unexplained cameo by somebody like take a John Hamm type guy.
You know who I think would be actually a great if they got what's the guy that does the war never changes.
Ron Perlman.
Ron Perlman to be
That would be
the
great,
Mysterious
actually. Yes,
Stranger or something
that
like
would be really good.
Which is kind of cool because he does, he's in the Mysterious Strangers in the other games, and Ron Perlman is also his voice is in the other games.
Yeah.
So, speaking of the cosmic horror thing you mentioned, not that it's like a horror necessarily, but the Mysterious Stranger is just like a godlike entity. What is
A little
it?
bit,
It's
yeah,
weird.
like-
What is it? I
What
don't
is
know.
it? Yeah,
What
no,
is this
so-
invincible guy who just shows up?
Yeah.
That's
Out
really
of
fun.
nowhere. You could be in the middle of the desert, doesn't matter. He just shows up.
And those are the kind of fun. I think we were talking about before we started recording how 2 especially has all the pop culture references.
So many, more than I thought.
And little Easter eggs and all of these
They
kind
really
of
leaned
nods to
into it.
things. And in New Vegas, you can pick the Wild Wasteland perk.
Yep.
That kind of enables that.
Yeah.
A bunch of like goofy fun
There's the
things.
killer grandmas and the UFO, the aliens.
Yeah.
There's a few.
There's
things.
a whole bunch of those.
Yeah.
And I mean, we should say, you're talking about Black Isle.
Yeah.
And they kind of, I don't know what the whole story with the company was, but they kind of fell apart or
Mhm.
whatever.
They had
But
a
of those-
lot of legal issues and money battles and stuff
For
like
sure.
that, unfortunately.
But a lot of the people behind Black Isle got together and created Obsidian.
Yep.
Which, Obsidian's a black stone, Black Isle, like, sort of,
I didn't
that's,
get the
that's kind of the,
that's awesome.
and they took the Fallout 3 engine that Bethesda had bought.
Yep.
And created Fallout 3 based on basically the
New
Elder
Vegas.
Scrolls engine. And created Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
So New Vegas spiritually has a lot of vibes of Fallout 1 and 2. It also takes place on the West as opposed to the East Coast where Bethesda.
Bethesda tends to, because Fallout 4 was in
Fallout 4 is Boston.
Boston.
It
Well,
is very-
Bethesda, Maryland is right outside Washington, D.C.
because in
Ah.
3 you can go to the Bethesda studios. Like,
Yes,
they-
that's a building.
Really?
you can-
That's really fun.
Yeah.
their studio, like they put their studios in the game.
They're so
because
self-referential.
the area that you play in is the area, literally the area.
Is the
around
area where,
studio.
so Bethesda's like a suburb of Washington, D.C.
Hey, write what you know.
Totally. And it's, that's the town that they just started in and stuff. But yeah, the West Coast stuff has more of that Black Isle Obsidian kind of vibe. And then the
Right.
East Coast is the Bethesda.
Speaking of starting with and the West Coast, Fallout 1, 97, takes place in California, I believe, right?
Mhm.
So it came out in 1997. Storyline wise, so the bombs drop. So this is all the canon. What's nice about the Fallout series as well is the canon kind of traverses all of everything.
Persists. Yeah. All of the games are
There is some little changes,
some-
and we'll talk about it a little bit later.
but all
in
the games
series,
are independent stories in the same world.
Which I
But
love,
the
and I
world
think
is
that's
consistent.
part of why the show can be so successful. Because
Absolutely. Because
the
it can tell
world's
its own
consistent.
story. Yeah.
But so the bombs fall October 23rd, 2077. So what, 8 days before Halloween, which is why you see
You always see
stuff
Halloween
everywhere.
stuff hanging up, which is a great little thing.
So the first game occurs 2161. So not quite 100
Not quite 100 years yet.
The most focus of all of the games on just how bleak the post-apocalyptic world is. I mean, they all touch on it, but the first one really kind of leaned into that. Whereas subsequent installments, more and more, especially 3 and beyond, lean more into the levity, like the jokes and the.
I also
Right.
think that's a function of it being the closest to the when the bombs fell, right? Like it
Right,
is-
yeah, less
it-
than
there's
100
been
years
less
after.
time.
there's-
Right.
Yeah, whereas like 200 years later, maybe there's, I like that 3 was exploring a part of the U.S. that they hadn't really touched on in the earlier games as
Right.
well, because it gave them the latitude to kind of get more into, that world. And, the East Coast has more and more populous cities that would have been the target. It's got the capital, Washington, D.C.
Yep.
It's got New York, which I think is just wiped off the map by the bombs. And
how do you, how would you make a game? That would be too insane.
For sure.
To New York.
Yeah, I like to, even Boston was like, that was pushing the engine. And, I think all of the quirks and faults of those engines aside, I think they did a lot with what they had. And like, they're still, I think it's because the story is so good and the games are so fun that you kind of say, oh, like all those bugs are just part of the Bethesda charm.
Well, there's also so many decisions and options that you get as a player that each playthrough can be so vastly different that it really, no matter the type of player you are, it kind of caters to everybody. So that's,
but yeah, Fallout 1 2161.
2161.
Vault 13, is it?
I don't remember the vault number.
I think it was Vault
13 sounds right.
Vault 13, the first one.
And
you grow up in the vault.
Yep.
The vault loses its water chip.
The water chip breaks,
and then you have to go out of the vault.
Yeah.
To go find one somewhere else, and that's when you get exposed to the world.
And then, spoiler here, but I mean this is from '97. At the end of the game, ideally, you found the water chip, you bring it back, and then the overseer of the vault expels you from the vault.
Right, because you've seen too much. You've been exposed to the outside.
Other people in the vault are gonna want to see the world, so he exiles you. Turns out after that, the people get mad at the overseer.
They kill
him. Yeah. And then you, as the character, it turns out you don't find out in Fallout 1, but in Fallout 2, you then, as the character, go out into the desert and you build a town. Essentially, you found a town. Found. I think what's the
found throw.
You founding a town.
You found the town.
Find the town,
but you don't find it. You know what I mean? It's like a weird. You don't find a town. You're founding. Yeah,
how about we say they start a town?
I started a town, and which becomes Arroyo, and in Fallout 2, that's where your character's from. So your player character's from Arroyo, but just jumping back to Fallout 1, some of the voice actors there were like throughout the series. Fallout 4, not so many big names. Linda Carter was randomly in Fallout 4, but in the earlier games, there were a lot more famous names. So you had mentioned Richard Dean Anderson, also known as MacGyver. He was in Fallout 1. Brad Garrett.
Yep.
Who plays...
Primo Wormtongue and...
No.
Oh, wait.
Brad Garrett is the guy that...
That's Brad Dourif.
Yeah. No, Garrett is the guy from... He's the guy that kind of sounds like this from... Everybody Loves Raymond.
Everyone Loves Raymond. Right. Yeah.
Or he plays the Easter Island head in Night in the Museum. Richard Mall from Night Court.
From Night Court. Bull Shannon from Night Court.
He's in there. Ron Perlman, of course, he does the...
He's the War Never Changes.
And actually,
line.
so War Never Changes, they have that in, I think, all of the games. The fourth one, it's a bit different. It's the main character says it.
Right.
Because the opening...
The newscaster that's on the TV...
The newscaster is Ron Perlman.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
but he doesn't say the line.
No, he doesn't say the line.
So War never changes, but the line sometimes changes.
The line,
by the way,
War never changes.
In the TV show, my eyes rolled out of my head when they said it. It's just like, oh, yeah, okay.
They had to put it in somewhere, but yeah.
That was the wife, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's the added... So back to what you're talking about, the show, the added canon now that they've added about the bombs.
Very cool.
We'll get to that in a second.
Very cool.
I have thoughts on it.
Yes. CCH Pounder is in the first one. Tony Shalhoub, who's amazing.
Keith David.
Yeah. There's quite a few names in the first one. But going back to Fallout 2, Fallout 2, your main player, you are the grandson or great grandson.
It's like 100 years removed, right? So
it is.
Yeah, grandson. There's like a few generations.
It's 80 years, so it's 2241. Okay. So exactly 80 years from the
2161. Right.
Yep. You play the grandson. I'm assuming. Yeah, it wouldn't be great. Grandson or great grandson of the original player, the Fallout 1 character.
Right.
And your goal is to get the GECK, the GECK, the Garden of Eden Creation Kit, from a vault somewhere.
Right, which is a MacGuffin that allows you to
Kind of like a terraforming thing.
yeah,
to
create
life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
create life and fix all of the stuff. And it comes up again in Fallout 3.
A
It's
GECK
sort of,
does?
Yeah, it's sort of a main conceit of
It's like the kind of the one of the final bits of the story. It's
Yeah.
like kind of the
Right.
in the third act.
Yeah.
Right. As far as the game development, so Fallout 1 came out in 97. Fallout 2, 98.
yeah, that was that era of
That's
of
classic old games where they just
being able to
they
just
just
hammer
bang 'em
out the
out.
sequel.
Well, because the first one was so popular. I mean, they're using the same
they're using a lot of same engine-y kind of thing. Fallout 1 and Diablo 1, Diablo 2, kind of similar.
Right.
Like 1 or 2 year,
Yeah.
separation, and like just bam, Doom 1, Doom 2, like,
Right.
where there's not a ton of changes. There's just more content.
I mean, it's also like 4 or 5 people working 14-hour days.
Right. Yeah. The really small team, but also there is a speed that a small team can achieve that like a much larger, like it's been 9 years since Fallout 4 came out, and Fallout 5 is still another 6 years away.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the change is, I want to make a point here about the Fallout fan base is very divided. I mean, everybody loves Fallout. Well, this is a weird comment. Everybody that loves Fallout loves Fallout.
Right.
But everybody has their favorites.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because 1 and 2 isometric view, but also very different, because the second one, though it honored the predecessor in gameplay and kind of overall theme, Fallout 2 had kind of more darkness to it in relation to you're seeing a lot more killing, more slavery, prostitution. They brought in drugs. This is where Jet came into
Right.
play, was Fallout 2. But then you're also seeing, as we mentioned earlier, so much more pop culture references. The first one, I think the first Easter egg you see in the Fallout 1 is the TARDIS. It's just like a random
Yeah.
TARDIS kind of shows up, and then as soon as you walk towards it, it goes and disappears.
And this would have been before the kind of resurgence of Doctor Who. So like
Totally.
this wouldn't have been something that was super accessible on a North American
At
TV.
all.
These were just like super nerds
Yeah.
Who just knew everything.
that just
Yeah.
knew Doctor Who.
They had like Monty Python references,
Right.
Hitchhiker's Guide references. And then, the storyline. I don't know too much about Fallout 2. Do you guys know?
So 2, it's you're fighting the Enclave. Or
Yeah.
Like,
That's right, Horrigan.
Yeah.
So the Horrigan is like a super mutant in power armor, and he actually goes
Right.
and kills a bunch of people in your original and the Fallout 1 main character's original vault,
In
13.
13. Oh, okay.
And he's actually kind of going around and killing a bunch of people. Yeah, from the Enclave. Oh, and that's right. The Enclave base is on an oil rig.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
And Enclave being the remnants of of America, basically, people trying to still keep America.
Yeah,
alive.
my understanding is it's kind of added onto by the show, but it's essentially like high up minds, powerful people that want to be cryogenically frozen or have their brains put in jars.
No,
Yeah, that kind
so
of thing.
those aren't. That's not, at least from if I'm not mistaken, in the show, that's not the Enclave. That's just Vault-Tec.
No,
Yeah,
but
but it's that
a
kind
lot of them were
The Enclave were
American military.
the a bit of the shadow government pre-war,
right.
that was sort of pulling the strings, but they also are the self-appointed continuation of the American government.
Right.
They see themselves as the continuation of that,
Mhm.
even if they're not fully in power of the same territory. That's how they sort of see themselves. And in Fallout 3,
Yeah, they
the
still have a
Enclave-
president. Like, kind of still have a president. You talk to the
yeah,
president.
they have a
before you-
president who's voiced by Malcolm McDowell.
Yes.
That's-
in Fallout 3.
He's
Like Clockwork Orange.
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and-
that's right.
And a million things. Yeah.
right.
Um,
Speaking of voices, Fallout 2, not as big of a list.
Michael Dorn, though.
Michael
He's-
Dorn's the big one.
Yeah. And
So
as
having-
Marcus, right?
Sorry?
Marcus, the super mutant.
The super mutant. Yeah, and he comes back in New Vegas, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
But Michael Dorn, also known as
Worf.
Worf from Star Trek Next Generation, which we were just
And
talking
Deep
about
Space
off
Nine.
recording. That's right, and Deep Space Nine. So
I mean, I did cool things in high school.
Before we move on, speaking of like,
Yeah.
you said there's like that split in like people love 1 and 2 or they love what comes after.
Yeah.
And it's
even between 1 and 2, you
Yeah,
have people
one-
that like
one and
1
two.
more than 2. And
But even then, 3 in New Vegas, it's I think the older games they're more irreverent. They're just they play more with that clash of like serious and dark and goofy.
Right.
And
Right.
like whereas 3, I think it plays it a little. It still has those moments of goofiness, but it's a little bit more even keel.
3 has that vibe of like 1 and 2 were the sort of independent albums, and 3 is the new studio album
Yeah,
kind of
it's-
thing, where it's like, okay, it's a little bit more polished, but that rubs the highs and the lows off a little.
All the rough edges are gone.
Yeah,
all the
and-
weirdness
Yeah.
is gone.
I always felt like 2 was the one that the people that I knew had the strong, like they were like Fallout 2 is one of the greatest games kind
Yeah.
of vibes. That it was like a continuation of what Fallout 1 had set up rather than, like flipping it. I don't think I played either of them enough
to be able to
to give a
differentiate it,
huge
kinda.
opinion
Yeah.
on them.
I think the Fallout 1 campers are probably because it's the original.
I think the
There's a lot of
people
that.
that like the Fallout 1 and 2 feel that of the new generation, New Vegas is the best.
Well, because it's with the same people.
It's the same people, but it also there is a vibe in New Vegas that is
Mm.
hard to put your finger on that 1 and 2 does capture. And New
Gotcha.
Vegas also, like it's just
it's the people who just they made it. They know how to
they
write
know
it.
how to write. And there is a if you played enough Bethesda games, there are basically only like 2 or 3 types of quests and like 2 or 3 types of NPCs. Like they're, and the level design is like you can kind of
Right.
there's a consistency to that New Vegas just is different in that respect. So
And speaking of Bethesda, the next section, which I've named Bethesda than all the rest. Huh? Question mark?
Oof.
Bethesda.
remember earlier when I was like, not your best work?
This is my best work. That's what you're saying, right?
Is the
That-
best one
that's
yet.
right.
This is Bethesda
that's-
than all the rest of it?
Uh,
Fallout 3 came out in 2008, so that's 10 years after, so they had a bit more time. In that time, a lot of legal things
stuff, and
happened,
it ended
and-
up in
a lot of failed games. There were a few that came out. Tactics released.
Yes, I
This is
should
first
say, yeah.
spin-off.
So we're not diving too much into the
Fallout Brotherhood of Steel,
Brotherhood of
and
Steel,
Fallout
yeah.
Tactics,
Yeah.
which were still kind of
Tactics was kind of
turn-based.
close to 1 and 2. Brotherhood of Steel was like a top-down beat 'em up. It was a much different game.
right.
It was a very, very
I don't think
Yeah.
you
I
play
played
as
that.
3 characters
yeah.
who are like Brotherhood of Steel, like recruits, and you're trying to save other brother. It's very strange, much different game.
interesting.
And then a bunch of
That's an interesting
unfinished
tie to
games.
the Max storyline too.
a little bit, yeah.
Kinda feels.
But a bunch of unfinished, like Van Buren,
Van Buren was
which was
what,
code name for what 3 was supposed to
what
be.
the Black Isle 3 would have
Yeah,
been.
and then there was
Oh, I
Fallout
see, yeah.
Online, which never materialized, which was the sort of the catalyst that Bethesda took Fallout away from Interplay.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because there
Ah.
was so Bethesda bought the Fallout name, they bought the rights to it,
Right.
but they allowed Interplay to still make money on the first 3 games as well as make Fallout Online, which I don't think there's a ton of detail. I didn't find a ton of details about it,
Right.
but they didn't deliver on it. So big legal battle. Bethesda took the Fallout, the whole thing. from them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But because of that, Fallout 3 came out.
Fallout 3, so 2008. Storyline wise, this one takes place in 2277. So
So
that's
exactly 200 years after the bombs fell.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. It's 36 years after Fallout 2.
Mhm.
So this one, the previous 2 were successful, but Fallout 3, 4.7 million units in the first month.
It was
It was big. It was real big.
again. I remember
4.7 million.
being in like late middle school, early high school when this game came out, and it was just all anyone talked about. It was
And this
all
is
anyone
this is
played.
2008, so it's not like games now. Although I'd argue games now aren't maybe as.
It would have been
It's
it would have
still-
been early in the Xbox 360.
This was
cycle.
quite early in the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
And so there was sort of a new push for, like there was a bunch of, and like, was that PS3?
PS3, Xbox 360,
PS3, Xbox 360. There
and-
was this sort of new,
and the Wii.
big console out for,
Yeah.
sort of both of them. And I think, Halo had been the big console first person shooter that had really sort of like, changed the game. And so like the first person shooter now was, like, and this was still kind of RPG. Like,
So I want to, before we get too far ahead, I don't want to glaze over the fact that this was a first person shooter. So this was a huge change.
A massive departure from
very,
the
very
previous.
So
different.
from that isometric to the first person shooter, and very divisive for the fans.
Right. And like, it's hard to think of Fallout 3 being anything that it is, but we mentioned it already once before, but like Diablo
Mhm.
still, like Diablo 3, which came out a little bit after,
Can't remember.
or around, within a few years
But
of Fallout
all
3.
its iterations have stayed isometric.
Has stayed isometric. And so like there is a world where you could have done that, but I like the, if I'm inhabiting the world of this one person, seeing things through their eyes in first person, I think
Totally.
makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's just like the technology didn't really allow for what they wanted to do with 1 and 2
Yeah.
as a first person.
There's no world in which Fallout 3 released as an isometric game and it became what it was.
And became what it was. No,
They-
because the younger, especially younger gamers,
First person
wanted
shooters were
first person shooters was the thing.
style at the
It
time.
was so popular.
was
You'd
first-person
had the
shooters.
success of
But they kept
James
elements
Bond
of turn based in VATS.
yes,
which
so
I
this
thought
was
was a
the
neat-
introduction of VATS as well.
Yeah.
Which is Vault Tech Assisted Targeting System.
Sounds right.
I mean, VATS is such a huge part of. Again, I didn't play the first 2, but like VATS, I just love VATS and being able to shoot people's heads up.
It's pretty sweet.
And they can't even get to.
And I think for people who are really fast twitch, like Call of Duty players and stuff,
Yeah.
Fallout isn't that. Like you don't
Mm.
get the same, sort of like Iron Sights type of first person shooter experience.
Right.
But also that kind of game alienates people, right? Like there's a lot of people who are like, I'm just not like a
Well, because you have to
shooting
be
people
so
constantly.
skilled,
yeah.
and before you can get there, you're dying all
And
the time.
and like a good RPG, I think, Fallout 3 isn't all about the shooting. It isn't all about just killing people. It's very story driven.
Right.
And so to have the ability to hit a button, pause.
Or pseudopause. It's
No,
like slow motion.
It's a complete pause in Fallout 3.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, everything's.
Oh, see, Fallout 4.
Fallout 4,
they're
they
still moving.
you go into slow motion.
Yeah, 3 New Vegas, you pause and you could walk away. if you
3,
want.
and it's just sort of like,
Interesting.
and and then you can kind of take a breath and be like, okay, tactically, how am I going to do this? And then you it gives you the percentage of chance to hit different body parts and stuff, and that's still really filling that GURPS kind of vibe, that
Right.
sort of RPG.
Yeah, you see
know.
the like, what's my if I roll a d20, what's my percentage chance to hit this guy?
And the
Kinda,
fact that the maximum percentage to hit everything is 95%
You can always miss.
represents
the one.
the
The
represents
one on the D20.
rolling anything but a 1
Yeah.
on a d20.
Yeah.
GURPS was, I think, a 3d6 system, so it's a little
Okay.
different, but yeah, that's essentially where that 95% comes from.
Now, with the change, I mean, it's a lot. You need a lot more processing power to do that first-person shooter because
Sure.
everything's moving, not just you and the other kind of bots on the screen. But with that, also came a lot of glitches. So notoriously, all of the Bethesda games have amazing, like whether it's what's the space one,
Starfield.
or whether it's bow and arrow.
Skyrim. Or Oblivion or Elder Scrolls. games.
Constant glitches, and I put a card in the deck specifically. It's the card. It's a legendary card, so it does trigger, but it's 5 mana and does absolutely nothing. It's a creature, and so when it's in your hand, you're just like, oh man, it's this like random thing that you're like, I guess it's fine. It's not the end of the world, but it's kind of an annoyance.
It adds. I think the glitches of it add so much. There's so much of the character of of the modern Fallout games.
Yeah.
Is that my most memorable is like I shoot a guy and his body texture stretches across the entire map for like a minute and the game crashes. Like, oh, cool.
So my most memorable, this was in Fallout 3, and I don't. So you can fast travel in these games,
Yes.
but you can only fast travel when you're not immediately in danger, when you're not in combat.
Not in combat, yeah.
Which makes sense. You can't just like walk away if people are chasing you or potentially going to kill you. You can't get out of the situation. But the thing that I guess counts is proximity to bad guys.
Yeah, or aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things, it's a little bit of a cheat, but it's something that the VATS allows you to do, is you can kind of just walk around hitting the VATS button.
Yeah.
And if nothing happens, nobody's around. But
I
as
do
soon
that
as somebody,
all the time.
as soon as somebody's there, all of a sudden it like flips to like something you wouldn't have like seen, and you're like, oh, okay, there's a guy over there. I was playing Fallout 3 somewhere in the middle of downtown DC, and I'd either with a grenade or a missile launcher or something that decomposed this person's body. And from a back end perspective, what I think happens is the object that was the alive person or monster or whatever is swapped out for a series of body parts. Right? It's like, okay, like this thing, delete, and we inserting in a bunch of new things, and these things.
So it goes from one object to a bunch
in the span of a frame.
Yeah.
And then those things all have like a velocity away from the center.
Okay.
So they all just kind of like, it just goes boop, and they like fly apart. It's not actually taking the arm off of the model and decomposing it.
They just turn into little giblets and
turns it into little giblets. And I think I had done something where I'd blown somebody up that I didn't even maybe know existed or whatever, and jumped away at pretty much the exact moment that this person died and their body turned into this other thing.
A spattering.
And one of the things is that the game only saves the position. It doesn't save the velocity of items. So when you travel away, it just saves the position of the items that were there. So the people and the blah, blah, blah. It doesn't save like, oh, this thing was moving in this direction. So later, when I warped back to this place, there was a perfect column of body parts stacked on top of each other.
Wow.
Where this person had stood. And I was like, that is incredible. And I'm only assuming that's how the back end of it worked, because I know a little bit about it, but like it was just like, what an odd thing to see.
I saw something vaguely similar where I guess I would have killed someone and then traveled the same time, then traveled back, but the game I guess never recognized that they died, but it changed out, so they were just a bunch of walking around body like bits. They were just a bunch of bits,
like
they were
bits in a jumble, kind of.
I think it's been 15 years or whatever since it came out, but I seem to remember like, you're not a guy anymore, but you're still talking to me. And
and I've seen like one thing that you do in 3D texturing and 3D modeling, is you only render one side, the side that's facing the camera.
Right.
Right. And so technically the inside of the head, if you were able to position the camera in, you wouldn't be rendering the inside of the head because like, you're on the other side of the polygon and the camera just sees straight through.
Yeah.
And so it's invisible from one side, but visible from the other.
Right.
But they flip that around on somebody's head.
So their head was the outside of the head was the inside of the head?
You couldn't see the front of their face, but you could see the inside of the back of their head.
Weird.
And it was so bizarre, but their eyes were just floating.
The floating eyes one is
in all Bethesda games, the eyes and mouth and teeth and
the
tongue
separate objects.
are always rendered.
And that's how you animate.
Yeah.
In the
so
game
you just see floating heads and mouths and
real great stuff. I also like the almost like kind of drum beats that just inanimate objects create when they're just trying to exist, but like the physics is disagreeing. like, you know, just like a couple of things fall over, like especially bones. This always seems to happen with bones,
rolling around.
where they're just like,
When
and
you
they're
walk
just
through
like,
bones, it definitely
yeah, they're just
it
like in a
triggers them
box
to start.
somewhere, and like you've just like walked into the room, and they're just like dancing in a corner.
Or you jump on an object and it just like decides it doesn't want to be there and
Yeah,
it's
it
just
just
gone.
Yeah. There's actually so one of this is Fallout 4, but there's the something slugger or something like that. It's a baseball bat.
Mhm.
And they have incorporated, so there's a glitch that happens where sometimes and you see this in Elder Scrolls and stuff, where when one of the giant guys hits you and you just fly.
Skyrim, yeah,
you
get knocked by a
yeah.
giant. And
So they've incorporated in this bat that there's a percentage chance that sometimes you're just gonna knock them
That's great.
flying. So I do think it's funny that they've
the
embraced
swatters.
it. Yeah.
There's one
Um,
guy at Old Wrigley Field or not Wrigley Field. Boston fans are gonna kill me. Fenway Park.
Oh yeah. Ugh. Diamond City.
Diamond City. That sells baseball bats with
Yeah.
like, you know, nails sticking out of them.
Yeah.
and stuff.
One of my, this is again Fallout 4, but one of my recent glitches was so when your companion goes down, they don't die. They just kind of sit there
They're
with
limp.
their
They're
legs
hurt.
splayed
Yeah.
like a kid almost, and then you go stim pack them, and then they're fine.
Or wait till combat's over and they'll get.
Yeah, or wait till combat. So I stim packed them. Oh no, I didn't stim pack them. I just finished the combat because I don't really. They're kind of useless most of the time, anyways, in combat. But
Yeah, they carry your heavy things.
that's what they are. They're
Yeah.
bags, which is really funny what they did in Fallout, the show.
All the squires
The
have
squires
they're
are just
over
the
encumbered
bag
with the giant
carrier.
bags.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you do to your companion. They're just there for bags. After the combat finished, they remained in that like legs splayed sitting down, and they didn't get back. But so I was like, oh, weird. Okay, glitch, whatever. I started running, and then I stopped and I turned around. Right behind me, still in the same position, and they would just teleport to where I was,
But
in
still
this,
sitting
still
down.
sitting in the displayed. So that was a fun one as well.
Those are fun. Most of those glitches though can be fixed by like fast traveling somewhere and fast
Yeah,
traveling
yeah.
back. Like every time you fast travel, it seems to like kind of
Reset.
the world. So it is nice that there's a little
Generally, I think it's almost a Fall 3 sold so well, but on launch was like pretty unplayable, and it was fairly frequently that like a critical path NPC or item just wouldn't appear in your map, and you're playing on Xbox, you can't get it back.
Yeah,
It's just
it's
you
just-
just got to restart.
Yeah.
Hopefully you have a save. If not,
Yeah.
You know what?
And
I
even
will
if
say
you have a save, it's no
even in
guarantee.
Starfield, and I don't want to get into Starfield, but there was some glitch where like I finally had like a settlement where I could, or not settlement, but like a place where I could put some of my gear, and I think I put it on like a mannequin kind of like armor rack thing, and I came back and it was like a unique item and it was just gone, and I was like, what the hell? But I'm playing it on console, and I like check, and they're like, oh yeah, like don't put anything on like this particular thing in that because you just can't get it back. And I'm like, neat that that's in there, and
Wish
like
that
I don't
I
have
knew that
anymore.
before.
Yeah.
Now the storyline for Fallout 3, we talked a little bit about it before, briefly, but
A little similar to 1, where you
yeah.
grow up in the vaults.
yeah, you grow up in the vaults, and then your dad goes off on a mission.
voiced by Liam Neeson.
And you kind of have to go out and try to find him. You find him fairly early in the game, right?
yeah.
You find out about where he's gone.
Oh, okay.
Also another water related mission.
The water, purifying
Oh,
water
yes.
is kind of the conceit
Yeah,
of that.
yeah.
So you walk out, and this was my falling in love with the world moment, was when you emerge out of the vault for the first time
In 3.
in 3. You know, they even do kind of the brightness of
Yeah,
like,
the
okay, you know,
blinding.
I'm seeing the sun for the first time,
Which they also
you know,
do
kind
in
of-
the show.
which they do really very well in the show. And there is that sort of moment, and then you pick up a radio signal, and it's the voice of Three Dog, who's one of the DJs or
Such a
the
great
DJ
character,
in of a radio station that's somewhere out in the world,
Mhm.
and helps you a little bit by just sort of generally giving you a little bits of information and talking about the music that's playing, and we'll probably talk about the music at some
Yeah,
point
we'll
in this.
talk a little bit about that.
And that was just, you know, and I went left when you're supposed to go right and got my ass handed to me, and like, but like you just don't
Yeah.
know, right? Because, or maybe you do, and I wasn't paying attention, but like, I think there's a sign that says this way to Megaton, and I like didn't even read that, and I just went the wrong way, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the sort of this sort of like moment of like, oh, like once you're off that kind of, the beginning is very much on rails, where you have to go through a bunch of gates, but it happens fairly quickly. And all of the games, I think, are a
Well,
little
and
bit like
speaking
that.
of Megaton, that you're faced with that big decision.
You're faced with that big decision
do you
early
blow up
on.
Megaton or do you save it?
Yeah.
So.
But you that's sort of that's the first place that you come to, right? Like there's always the first town that you come to that has like people that aren't trying to kill you immediately, right? Like there's always like a rad roach or something pretty innocuous that, it's like, oh, like I have to punch this thing, and then like you find a little pistol, and like that kind of
totally
in sort of all of the games. So
and kind of back to the point of, do you destroy Megaton or not? This was also the first game that used karma. So karma was in my understanding, in Fallout 3 in New Vegas, it was kind of this, everybody, just all the NPCs kind of inherently knew what your karma was and would react to you differently.
And it's more in 3 than anything else.
Okay.
And it's a point system. And I think under the hood, it's a scale from -1,000 to +1,000.
Okay.
And all of the actions in the game can have a karma value associated with them.
Right.
So you could be
saving people, stealing, killing.
You could be in a
innocents.
completely abandoned thing where nobody, like everyone that lived there is dead.
Yeah.
But if there's a red
Thing that's owned by somebody.
Yeah, something, and you take it, it's like -5 points.
Yeah.
And it just says your karma has gone down. It doesn't tell you how much, but like people have figured out how much, obviously like murdering somebody that hasn't done anything wrong, isn't hostile towards you, costs a lot more than just stealing a plate.
Right.
But these are the things that add up.
Depends on the plate, I guess.
But most of the quests have a good way to finish and a bad way to finish.
Yeah, they have a blue and a red side, basically.
Yeah, totally. And so you were talking about like what is good and what is bad,
Right.
in Fallout.
It's all gray.
Bethesda, I think in Fallout 3, really made some decisions for what is good and what is bad.
They codified it a little bit.
And so I think some people were kind of like, oh, okay, like it's also a bit of a broken system, because you can do a whole bunch of really terrible things
and then donate,
and then just
30
offset,
caps over and over.
just
to
keep
someone.
donating like water bottles to the guy who's starving outside of
Right.
Megaton. Like there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to just kind of like offset that karma. And the other thing is that your karma maxes out at the extreme end.
Right.
So if you're already at like 1,000 and
could
you
go
do
to-
something,
you can kill a town.
well, if you're already at 1,000 and you do something good, you stay at 1,000. And then if you do something bad, like let's say
Right.
you murder somebody, you go down 100. But if you do the bad thing first, you go down to 900. Then you can do the good thing to bring you back up to
Right.
1,000. So like it's a weird kind of boxed in limit that
Yeah.
kind of breaks. But the other thing is it's really hard to stay neutral. And I played enough Fallout that I did a third playthrough where I tried to play neutral,
Right.
which is hard because you have to stay within a certain band, and there are certain
And
doors
you don't
that
know where
open
you
and
are.
close. Yeah, it just sort of says you're neutral, but you don't know how close to good or bad
Right.
you are. And there are certain doors that open and close depending on if you're good, neutral, or bad
Right.
karma.
The,
People won't do things. People won't serve you.
Way easier to be very good or very bad.
It is.
Whereas
yeah.
the whole system feels very like someone played Fable and really
No, very much. It's
very much like, oh, I love that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna take that exact.
Yeah, and
was Fable before this?
It was
Yeah.
original Xbox.
Yeah, okay.
Probably 2000.
Great game.
Yeah.
2001.
But yeah, the that karma system, and especially because all of the quests sort of have a positive or negative karma. If you want to play the neutral playthrough, you accidentally gain positive karma, and you're like, well, I guess I gotta go murder somebody to offset this. It's like, it's a little broken to play a neutral playthrough,
Right.
but it was a fun challenge.
Now, was the karma different than in
New Vegas has reputation, and it's more
Right.
it's more faction based.
Yeah, each faction has their own. You can be good or bad
And
with
each faction has sort of a nemesis faction. So if you do good things for one, the other faction will be
Automatically
pissed
knows.
off.
Yeah, if you do good things with the NCR, Caesar's Legion doesn't like it, vice versa.
But it's also two separate values. So you can have good and bad reputation
so it's not
simultaneously.
one scale. It's
not
two
a single
bars.
And so there are ways where you can and it's cumulative. It never
Never caps.
It never. Well, it does cap out, but it's both of them are. You can't remove reputation.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah,
so
right,
you
right,
can do a whole bunch of good things for them, then do a whole bunch of bad things, and you will have both good and bad reputations.
We remember your murders.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which feels more natural.
Yeah.
And also you get there's like a label that you get associated with you depending on kind of what quadrant of good and bad.
Okay.
If you plot those
Oh,
on sort of
yeah,
a
I forgot
two
about that.
dimension kind of graph,
Right.
you know, if you've got high good reputation and no bad reputation, you're a this. But if you've got both, you're kind of like, well, he did some good things for us, but he did some bad things. And those open and close certain doors depending on where you sit with certain people.
We've moved on to subtly moved on to New Vegas, but not so subtly. This section I like to call "Out with the Old, In with the Vegas."
New Vegas?
Just Vegas. Out with the old, in with the Vegas. Because it's hilarious. So this happened. This came out 2010, so 2 years after Fallout 3.
Okay.
The storyline wise was 4 years after, so 2281 is when this
Right.
storyline happened.
And you're not a vault dweller in this.
This is the first one where you're. Sorry.
It's the
second
first one where
you're
you're not connected to being a vault.
Vaults. It's not
Vault,
related to
yeah.
Vault.
You're a
You're a
courier.
character.
You're just a guy.
You're a courier who gets killed by
Shot in the head, not killed.
Sorry, right. They
Shot in
try to kill
They
you.
try to
Shot
kill
in the
you
head by Benny.
by
Benny,
Benny,
who's
voiced by Matthew Perry,
the late
R.I.P.,
Matthew Perry.
who was such a fan of Fallout 3
Yeah,
that he like reached out, I think.
yeah. I'll try to link it in the notes, in the show notes. But there's an interview with him, and he's talking about being the character,
And he's great. He's great. That character is great. He's a lot of fun in the game. He is a sort of Rat Pack inspired schmoozer kind of, you know, it's just business, baby. You know,
totally.
he's a lot of fun in that game. But yeah, he shoots you in the head to get the thing that you are couriering.
Yep.
At the very beginning, where you have, you know, sort of no control. And like in Fallout 3, you kind of not like in Fallout 3, you wake up in a doctor's office who's voiced by I can't remember the guy's name, but he played the commander on Battlestar Galactica.
Okay.
May actually be a Vancouver based.
Yeah, there's quite a
Okay.
few. So I'll quickly go through some of the names.
But he plays this doctor, and he's sort of like, whoa, what, you know, like, do you remember your name? And that's where you enter your name, and like, you know, these little things. It's
I
a
love
fun
when they
way
do
of
that,
kind of,
yeah.
you know, working the
You
character.
do the
creation
aptitude
into
test to see what your
Yeah.
stats are.
Yeah, you do
and-
like a little one of those
Right.
like arcade style like strength tests, you know, to kind of
Oh,
like
the grip
you know
thing?
the little grip thing, you know. So,
I just want to quickly go through some of the names while we're
mhm.
briefly talking about voices. But so you have Felicia Day, Michael Dorn,
Right. Yeah.
Dave Foley is in here.
oh, he's one of the robots. That's right. He's
Yep. Yep.
Is he Yes Man?
he is
I think
Yes
so.
Man.
I
Yes.
think he's Yes Man. Chris Christopherson with that great voice like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
He plays the kind of crazy guy. I can't remember the character's name, but Zachary Levi. There's quite a few. This one was obviously Matthew Perry's in there.
But the radio DJ in this one,
oh yeah, Mr. Vegas himself.
Mr. Vegas, Wayne Newton.
Yeah, well, the character's name is Mr. Vegas,
yeah.
but he's also kind of known as Mr. Vegas.
And I
Wayne
mean,
Newton.
it's just such a treat to hear his voice on the radio. It's
Yeah.
actually it's my favorite radio station in all of the Fallout games. Is the New Vegas, Mr. Vegas.
Oh yeah,
radio.
okay.
Yeah, we didn't mention it in 3, but
The music.
the music.
Oh, true.
The
Yeah,
music is like half of why people love the Fallout games.
it's such a big.
And again, that's that juxtaposition of that sort of like they're from an era where like everything's kind of like not light and fluffy, but like, you know, the music couldn't get too deep or dark, right?
Yeah.
And all of these songs are like, you know, great pop songs from,
Yeah.
you know, and part of it's like a licensing thing. They're probably relatively cheap songs to license.
Well, and some of them are. Yeah, some of them are so. Like, there's the classic radio stations in Fallout 4. Like, those are all old.
Yeah,
very old songs.
yeah, and but the in-world explanation being that
This is all the stuff that exists that wasn't just.
this is
released.
just
Yeah.
everything that existed because, you know, progress was stunted by everything being focused on the war, this Cold War that led to the bombs falling in 2077. And so this is all just the music that exists that's left over
Yeah.
from that era.
And it's also just left like I think it's like an era of music that people my age would never hear.
Mm.
Right.
Like I would never heard I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire.
That
That's an
is such a
incredible
great
song.
So
Yeah.
I actually
It's kind
grew
of
up.
like the theme of.
I grew up with like my mom especially listening to a bunch of that stuff, and it was older than her generation.
She just
She
liked that
grew up
stuff.
with it, like listening to it because her mom listened to it. So like, I got this sort of, like I know some of these songs, and like I know the Ink Spots, and I know, like, Bob Crosby and the Bobcats, and like a few of those, and then like obviously Ella Fitzgerald and some of those, but like then some of the other ones where you're like, oh, I don't know this. Like we should just for a moment, because I think it's probably one of the most famous songs from the games is Butcher Pete.
Oh, I love that
What's
song.
Butcher Pete?
Butcher Pete. It's a
Part 1
Roy
and 2.
Brown. Yeah, they got part 1 and 2 in Fallout 4, but in Fallout 3, it's just the song, and a lot of songs from that era have to use some analogy to talk about sex or drugs or whatever, right? Because you
Right.
couldn't just say, sex.
I want to hold your hand.
And
It's like,
yeah,
is it
and the song,
Whacking and smacking and
yeah,
chopping
whacking
that
and
meat.
smacking. It's
Oh,
about this
that
guy
one.
who's a butcher, and he's chopping all this meat, and like you're kind of listening to it, and you're like, okay,
I totally
I'm
know
having a
this.
tough time
Yeah.
figuring out what the exact analogy for sex is here. But like, is this guy just legit a serial killer?
I think so.
Because like that's the other like,
It
it's
could've
like
been.
And it's so upbeat. It's so goofy.
it's so upbeat, and it's just like I can't find the analogy to this. Just he's talking about like he's chopping up all the women's meat. But no, I like the sort of American Western kind of, but like that '60s Western,
Right.
like
yeah,
Big
and-
Iron and.
Oh, I was gonna say
and-
Big Iron's that and Johnny Guitar
Johnny
are
Guitar.
the standout songs from
great
New
songs.
Vegas.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Big Iron is the one that's had like the most cultural impact because it's a very funny song.
There's a
Big
song
Iron
in Fallout 4. It's so Freedom Radio, the Minutemen,
Mhm.
and it's just a fiddle.
Yep.
Playing, and in the series when they're walking towards what's the actor from SNL? Fred Armisen plays the DJ, the radio DJ, and he's
In Fallout 4?
No, in the series.
Oh.
Remember they go up, they're trying to
Oh
broadcast
yes.
the thing, and he's in
Like
the-
the second to last episode.
and all
yeah,
the
yeah,
traps
okay.
and
Yeah.
stuff. They're playing that fiddle song from Fallout 4, and I find it such a peaceful because there's only a few radios. There's 3 radio stations.
Yeah.
In
Three,
4.
three main.
Actually, speaking of fiddle, there's one mission. I can't remember the mission in Fallout 3. I think maybe it's New Vegas, but where you go to find this lady's
It's 3.
violin. Is
It's
it 3?
So she lives alone in this sort of secluded, blocked by rocks, so it's hard to get to, and there's a bridge, and you go there, and she's living by herself, and she asks to go get. She plays the violin, but she can't get a violin, obviously. So she asks you to go into the nearby vault, which was a vault for musicians,
Gotcha.
and you go find a violin there. You give it to her, and then for the rest of the game, she broadcasts violin music, so you can listen to violin,
Which is
music.
beautiful. So I think I do love that. But
2 things I just discovered looking up the voices for Fallout 4.
yes.
1, McCready.
Yeah.
Is voiced by Matt Mercer.
Oh, wow.
Of course it is.
But then Travis, the DJ, the Diamond City radio DJ.
Oh, the guy that has no confidence?
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Do you know who he's voiced by?
No.
Guy's name is Brendan Hunt. He is the assistant coach on Ted Lasso with the beard.
I haven't seen
Coach
Ted
Beard.
Lasso yet.
What?
I know. I know. I have it on a USB stick.
Oh my God. What a joyful show.
I've heard it amazing things.
Okay, we could just bring me back when you've got a Ted Lasso deck.
Oh gosh.
How
How do we do that? I guess there are some sports themes cards.
He's also, I think, a co-creator of the show.
Gotcha.
But he's an amazing character. I didn't realize that he was.
Well, on the topic of voices, I should also mention Danny Trejo and Will Wheaton are also in New Vegas as well. Danny Trejo he's a ghoul. So, of course, this was the return to Black Isle. So Black Isle took what Bethesda had created in that engine, and then, as we've mentioned before, kind of put their story writing and their storytelling into the game.
We should also say, I mean, the isometric to first person, Bethesda also already had that first person engine from Morrowind and Oblivion.
Right.
This was just putting Fallout into the Elder Scrolls engine.
Gotcha.
Really was kind of, and they're
Where
like,
the
well,
Elder Scrolls with guns thing come from.
It's post-apocalyptic Elder Scrolls with guns.
And because of their involvement, it kind of New Vegas felt like more like 1 and 2 spiritually, but it had the obviously the game, that first person game.
They really like split the upgrades. Like they had the more modern thing, but they were just, I think, more ambitious and more talented writers. They like were a more like complicated and well-crafted story.
Also, they weren't burdened with having to create the whole thing from scratch.
Yeah.
Right. They could just take the engine, make a few tweaks to it, because there are some
there's
UI
some
improvements.
deeper skill trees, and there's more positive negative effects like you were talking
Yeah,
about.
there's some trade-offs, especially the first. You're offered to take a perk at the very beginning,
Right.
but it has a negative impact as well as a positive one.
A lot of people have said this kind of feels like a mod of Fallout 3, Fallout 3.5. Some people refer to it.
Yeah.
And did we talk about Wild Wasteland? I know we were talking
We
about
mentioned
before
it
recording,
start,
but
yeah.
So this was I think that silliness, that goofiness, that
irreverence, that like
that Black Isle liked to have, or at this point they were Obsidian, but having it in a way that it was an option. So
It would have been weird if you weren't expecting it and didn't know it. You'd be like, it's a weird thing to just have in the game.
So let's explain what Wild Wasteland is for those that don't know.
My playthrough I did with Wild Wasteland a really long time ago, but at the start of the game, you get a certain amount of skill points to put into other skills, as well as you get one perk. Perks are in 3s and 4, and 3 New Vegas are like the big ones. So it's a really big decision to pick a perk that essentially does nothing. What Wild Wasteland does is it turns on essentially silly mode. There are a bunch of encounters and stuff in the game that only exist if you have Wild Wasteland on. One of the most key examples is there's a part in the game where aliens show up and you get attacked by aliens.
Yeah.
That only exists and you get a alien blaster, which is a gun from 3, much weaker than it was in 3. But if you don't have Wild Wasteland perk, you just can't get that.
Right.
And you can only take the Wild Wasteland perk at the start of the game.
That's the only time you can take it.
You can't take it through leveling up.
think
If I'm remembering correctly,
it's been a minute.
Wrong,
I
but I
gotta
believe it's
defer
like
to
a
you on
thing
that.
you have to pick at the start of the game
Yeah,
as your
interesting.
perk.
And it's randomness, it's weird little things, and
Yeah.
it even says like this, it just like adds like, I think it's there for either people who loved 1 and 2 and were veterans of the series and just wanted something else, or if you've played through once before, it's a great kind of next game to
point.
just be like, oh, what does this game look like with Wild Wasteland?
Yeah, New Vegas, I think one of its greatest strengths is it's super replayable because the story is
very flexible.
It's super open ended.
Yeah.
You
Right.
can go with any. It's a
What faction are you siding
go with, and you do it in any order and in any mixture of
there's only
good, bad.
the
and-
end game is very small, and it's at obviously the end, but like
Oh.
you can do a lot before you get to that point, and then that choice really kind of locks you into the last like very small
like
amount,
30 minutes or
yeah.
whatever.
And so you can do
So before that, it's fairly
before
open.
that it's just it's
nice.
it's one of the nice things where you can absolutely burn every bridge with the faction that you will ultimately align with, but the slate is wiped clean with that end game choice where they're like,
Right.
okay, you've screwed us over a whole bunch, but if you choose us, everything's cool.
You killed all but
Because
3
like
of us.
they
but,
can't have you be like,
right.
okay, I want to side with you guys, but like I already like screwed that over. Like they keep that door open.
And there's also the sort of the chaos ending. Go with the yes man, because in the game there's the NCR, there's the Legion, and then there's Mr. House, and then there's a secret fourth, which is one of Mr. House's robots, the Yes Man,
Played by Dave
who's
Foley.
like a
Dave Foley,
agent of chaos who wants to just destroy it all, kind of. And
Right.
if you go with him, it's not a bad ending per se, but it's kind of like the middle ending.
Well, and it's
just
sort of
the
like
middle, in the middle.
that's the one where you can be in control.
Yeah,
right?
you are kind of you side
you
with
kind
Yes
of-
Man, and you sort of take
You
control.
take
of the
over
strip.
New Vegas.
Oh, it's like I don't want any
anyone
of these
else.
3 factions.
You want it to be
I
me.
want me.
Yeah,
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
That's
So-
kind of cool.
and the Yes Man's also just a super cool character because in around New Vegas, there's a bunch of security robots. These like huge, beefy robots, screens in their chest, the wheel, and just for some reason, one of them has autonomy. Never really explain why.
I thought I read something. There was some sort of glitch or something that created it.
Yeah, maybe it is. But
and he's such a perfect voice casting because he's so over the top nice. Even when what he's saying is like really.
This is so. Dave Foley is Kids in the Hall.
Kids in the Hall.
Yeah. Or News Radio.
News Radio. As well. Yeah.
He's great. I love him. So moving on, Section 4, back to Bethix. Back to
what?
Bethix.
What does that mean?
Like back to basics?
But what's the other word you're trying
Bethesda.
to
Back to Bethix.
Ugh.
We're going back to Bethix.
I think your wife is going to leave you over that.
She's looking like she's ready.
She is unhappy.
She has questions.
You chose this.
You chose this.
You
said yes.
We don't have a choice.
You said yes.
I was there.
Back to Bethix. Fallout 4 came out in 2015.
Very
9 years ago.
Yeah.
That's almost the distance between 2 and 3. And that felt like a lifetime.
Yeah, it's true. And so much changed. Storyline wise, 2287, so only 6 years.
Is where most of the story takes place, but it starts in 2077.
This is true. There is a twist, so spoiler.
That's the very
Actually, I don't want
thing.
to. I don't want to spoil it because Carolyn is playing the game right now, so I don't want to spoil it. But yes, it takes place over a broad period of time.
It's the very, very first. You see a bit of the pre-war.
And some of the big changes, which, again, very divisive. The game doesn't really end, so there's no like.
Right.
You can finish the game. Whatever choices you make, you do have to choose. You do have to choose, but then you can just keep playing after that.
Right. I don't know if I ever actually. I think I did once where I was like, okay, I'm gonna save, do a thing. And then I was like, okay, that's what that looks like. But then I didn't actually want that choice. So like I went back to the save.
Yeah.
And like I just wanted to see what that looked like. But I don't think I've ever actually like fully finished the game.
I think the biggest thing that divides the fan base is settlement building in this game, because some people love it. I'll spend hours doing it. Where some people just really hate it. I mean, it's something that you don't really have to do.
It's mostly optional.
You have to do some of it.
It was very funny when you mentioned it, because I played Fallout 4 when it came out. It was okay, but like I say that, but I probably put like 40 hours into it because it's a Fallout game. You just kind of waste a lot of time.
Yeah.
But
40 hours is.
I also never finished it, but I didn't even look at the settlement building. I think I did what was
you have to do
strictly
a bit,
necessary, and then I was like, nope, never doing that again.
When it was announced, I remember watching. I think it was E3. Where they announced and they were showing, and they're like, and there's settlement building, and like I played Fallout 3 and New Vegas, and I lived in, you get gifted after, doing certain things, you get gifted like a place to live, where it's like, there's like a house in Megaton that you can live in, or in Tenpenny Tower, or in in one of the hotels and casinos like there or Novak in New Vegas, where you can keep your stuff, because as you said, like the game, late game, all of them become like this inventory management simulation game, right? Where you're just like, okay, like how do I, deal with all of my stuff?
I have 100 unique guns that I don't want to throw away.
Yeah, I don't want to throw away. I don't want to sell them, but I also don't want to take them with me everywhere, right? So you need a place to like hang your hat, and those 3 in New Vegas give you that, whereas 4, there are some of those options, but also they allow you to build your own. And that was neat because there's like in Skyrim also played a little bit with this, where there was a DLC that allowed you to build a house. It's very like you say like build this and the house is built. Like you don't get a lot of like flexibility around it, but like it allowed people to kind of customize things and put certain decorations up, and like main thing is like I just need a place to store my stuff, and like I want to show off the cool armor I have and stuff. And Fallout 4 really allows you to do that if that's the kind of game that you want to play.
So what I end up doing is so I have different settlements, and they branch out. You can have trade routes with Brahmin trader people. But I'll have my main ones, and each main one I'll have a base, and then I will have a superhero, like a fake character that I create that is a superhero for that area, and in one area he wears this specific thing and he uses a baseball bat, or in this one he uses a syringer and he always injects his the enemies with it makes them fight. So I have all these almost like these cultural folk heroes that exist in this world. Like, oh, in this area you're gonna meet, maybe you'll meet
and
the mosquito. Which
this is the beauty of that world, and that it really is role playing where you can really infuse yourself into this kind of.
But I have to find my son.
Right,
which is the whole. So that we didn't actually talk about this.
In Fallout 3 you have to find your dad, and Fallout 4 you have to find your son, and even the first time I played through, I wasn't overly compelled to do that. Like, I was just sort of like...
In 4?
The first time I played 4...
I always forget that, I need to go find my son.
Doing enough of that quest line introduces you to places and people that are really interesting.
Totally, yeah.
But then you get to a sort of a point where you're like, I'm good. And you just kind of go off and do your own thing.
Yeah.
I just recently, about a month ago, started replaying 4. And one of the more annoying characters in the game is Marcus. Is it Marcus? No.
No, Marcus is...
Preston
Garvey. Yeah.
Preston Garvey. Marcus
is
the other one, and Marcus Garvey is a political... unrelated to this, but that's just where my brain went.
Fascinating brain.
Preston Garvey.
Yes.
Who is...
There's another settlement.
Constantly asking you... And so I put him and all of those annoying people in one place, and then I never go to that place. And I haven't done anything with them. I've just sort of like, you all live here now.
And I'm going to put him on that island, the pirate island that you get.
I've built up the Red Rocket garage.
Yeah.
And it's only inhabited by the non-human companions that I've acquired. So it's all robots and a super mutant.
Amazing.
And a dog.
Amazing.
I actually got 2 dogs. I've played hundreds of hours, and I didn't...
in Fallout 4?
Yes, I didn't realize there's a guy that just walks around selling guard dogs. You can't really have them as a companion.
He's not your companion, though.
But he'll just live there.
Yep.
I was just sort of like, okay, where is this guy? I need to find him again because I want more dogs. I just want like a dog sanctuary.
Speaking of little things in the game, so another thing they added, video games. That you can
those
play
are fun.
Those are the little
games,
mini, like old school, like Donkey Kong style. They're not called those.
No, but it's very much just Donkey Kong.
Very much Donkey Kong, or what's the one where you shoot missiles out of the sky?
Like Missile Command.
Missile Command. Yeah.
Maybe that game is impossible.
Missile Command?
It's so hard.
Those original old games are all very different.
Missile Command is a different... That game is
well, because the controls are always a little clunky, but there also wasn't a lot of room to make it like scalable. Yeah. Right? It's just going to be what it is. And they were designed for you to just keep feeding quarters into and
totally, like not end. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it came out around the same time, but Fallout Shelter was the app. There was a
mobile game.
Yeah. Basically, I put a lot of time into it, and sadly did actually spend money for caps in the game. But I try to never do that for those kind of games. But you basically have a shelter.
$5. Yeah.
Have $5 for that many caps? Yeah, totally. I played a good number of hours.
There was
that one, which is a base building game essentially.
It is, yeah, and that was I during that E3 where they were announcing Fallout 4.
Yeah.
They also announced Fallout Shelter, and then I remember Todd Howard sort of saying, "Oh, and it's available today." So it was it was a neat kind of thing. I think the phone I had at the time had struggled, like it got real warm and it was real clunky.
It was kind of cute because like all of the characters, and you had
they've got that Vault Boy aesthetic.
They've got that Vault, but like so you see Preston Garvey, but as like Vault Boy aesthetic, Preston Garvey. So it was kind of cute and fun.
The one thing though, an app that if you play the PC version, at least for sure, you can get an app that is a Pip-Boy on your phone or your tablet that you are connected to the game, so you always have a Pip-Boy up on a second screen.
Oh, like when you're playing Fallout 4.
So you're playing Fallout 4, and then and so it was designed. Yeah. It was designed for the collector's edition, I think, where there was an actual Pip-Boy
that you put your
phone
would
in. Put your arm in and put a phone in.
So you could change equipment.
So
while
you
you're
could change your
game.
Equipment and actually like do like
That's
a real
so goofy.
And I didn't. I mean, I'm a fan. Like we said, I bought the Vault 101 sneakers. but I didn't buy the.
That'd
the
be
Pip-Boy.
great for cosplay. though.
Apparently, it didn't like really fit arms.
Oh,
Like I don't
Doesn't
think.
surprise me. It's like in the what was it, the Halo 3 collector's edition, where the Master Chief helmet is like for a cat. It's so small.
Yeah,
Like,
like
the
it's,
cats
for
fit
sheep.
people.
but I did have like a little tablet of some sort
Right.
that just sort of up on like a little stand.
yeah,
It
that's pretty
ends up being okay. It's weird though to be able to play, like because when you in game, when you go to your Pip-Boy, it pauses everything,
right.
and so this was you could kind of real time make.
Well, and
those
I
changes.
utilize that to my advantage sometimes.
Oh, for sure. You
Like,
hit the button.
Oh,
you're
I'm
like,
about to die. Eat
okay,
food.
yeah, eat all the food, take all the stim packs, switch to a different weapon,
Yeah.
and let's come out of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a little bit of a saving moment for sure.
Yeah. So after that game came out, so that was 2015. 2018, the next game came out. Now the title for this section, caveat, it's a question mark because there were some attitudes about it. I think a lot of them have changed, but the title of this section is Fallout 70 Sucks? Question mark.
It definitely did when it came out.
So, and this is my I like any good Fallout fanboy, got it at launch.
Yep.
I had along said like I'd be really interested in playing Fallout Online, but I had a vision in my head because I was following the sort of Fallout Online saga.
Because of the three of us, you're the only one that's really put hours into Fallout.
I put a
76,
lot of
so,
hours into it. Yeah. and just into Fallout 76.
Yes.
And so, but Fallout Online was going to be a thing, and then it wasn't. We talked about that earlier. But in my head, I was like, okay, what would I want? And
What is your dream
so
scenario
I
for
mean,
Fallout 6,
when
or
it
what
was, I wanted to be able to have my own. I envisioned it as like you would have like a little settlement. This was before Fallout 4, when Fallout Online was potentially going to be a thing.
Right.
And so I was imagining like one little protected area that you could keep all of your stuff. So it would be like a shared world, but I'd go into, let's say, a megaton, but like smaller, like a little settlement or
Right.
whatever. And it's just mine and no other players can get in there. So I could just keep stuff safe and like, have like a home base for my character, but then go out into the world and just, you occasionally see other people
Yeah.
trying to do, but you're playing like a Fallout 3 or a Fallout, 4 New Vegas or whatever,
Style game.
like a story game, but there's just other people running around and you never quite know, are they hostile towards me? Are they not? Like, I wanted to have that sort of, like when you're playing Fallout, right away if somebody's hostile towards you or not. If they're just a settler wandering the wasteland, they're not hostile initially unless you start shooting them.
Right.
If they're raiders, they're pretty much always hostile towards you unless you're playing a DLC where everyone's a raider.
Right.
But I like the idea of not really knowing. Like, here's just some other actual human that's seeing me. And they have that interchange in the show where the main characters come across a bridge and there are two other people and there's sort of a fun exchange
great
between
scene.
them
Yeah.
of like, sort of who are you, like, yeah, we're unarmed. Yeah, so are
Yeah.
we, kind of thing, And like, I was hoping for more of that, like a real tension, but you kind of need to have like high stakes around that, right? Like you need to, because otherwise, the reality of online games is like everyone will just shoot everyone because there's no drawback to doing it.
Right.
And I think they built in something where if you shoot other players,
I think there's just
there
no
was like a little
PvP,
bounty
I thought.
system or some kind of awareness or something. Right?
I think you just play with PvP off. Like, I think you can just.
Right. And,
Yeah,
and you
right.
could do that. So, but I found that there wasn't enough story. Like all the NPCs are just like robot shopkeepers.
And there's very few, right? It's most of the people you
No,
come
there's
across are-
there's no human NPCs.
There were no human NPCs to start. There might be now, but there weren't when I played. Like there's zero.
Oh,
Yeah,
I just meant like NPCs in general.
Oh, just
It's-
NPCs. Yeah. And
like
so
just a couple robots. I
it's
think, is all.
beautiful. The world, the map is really neat. And like, I like that they threw Mothman in there and like,
Yeah.
a few, like
Yeah, one of the
it
greatest.
made me want to go to West Virginia.
One of the greatest disappointments is that is such a great setting, and it got used on like a
On not
kind
a
of
super
a not
great
a
game.
not a
Yeah.
great super great game.
But
well,
you-
so like it's
For
and the
MMO
reason-
players, maybe it is something.
and
that
that's
they
why
like.
I wanted to put that caveat at the beginning of the section.
I've heard it's a pretty great game.
And that's the thing is now there's a very dedicated fan base. So it was a question mark. 70 sucks, not
Right.
a
And I
statement.
will tell you what, this was, I guess, maybe it wasn't communicated well. Maybe I just didn't know. But they ported over the Fallout 4 base building to Fallout 76. So you could build your own settlement in this shared world,
right.
which was neat. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I found this little spot up on a hill far away from everyone. And I was like, I just want a little shack where I can keep some of my stuff.
Right.
That's all we ever really want in these games.
Yeah.
You know, it goes crazy, and you've built like a crazy
Yeah.
mansion out of broken buses and things. But like, yeah, that's where you start. And I was like, okay, cool. I got my stuff here. You know, it's somewhat protected, but like it's here. And I logged off and came back a few days later, and my place had been completely demolished, and somebody else had set up shop there. And I was like, how dare you? And I just started like hacking apart this guy's thing. And all of a sudden these red flags are going up, and this guy's getting notified, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm just sort of like, you took my spot. And he's like, no, I didn't. Like, and so what I didn't realize is that, you know, I wasn't the only person that had set up shop on that spot, because there are only certain places that you can build on. But depending on like, if somebody else already had taken over that spot and you join a game where that your thing is saved in a different world. It's this like weird parallel.
How do you get to it then?
Well, you'd have to like log out of that server and join a different
Ugh.
server and find it. And so now I've got this like bounty on my head because I've been attacking this poor guy's place who, just like me, had set up shop in this like great little out of the way location.
But you thought he had taken down
I thought
yours.
I thought he'd completely
Right.
demolished, because it was totally different. I thought he'd completely demolished mine and built his own. And I was like, well, I guess this is the game. You know,
Which would make sense.
it would make sense a little bit, but it also punishes players like me that like, had a job and couldn't play 24/7 and
totally.
things like that. So I just, you know, then I was like,
that does cool things in high school.
but because it was online and but because it was online and like this was a real human, I couldn't just like load a save
Yeah.
where, you know, I couldn't undo that, right?
Yeah.
And so now I had this sort of like mark on my head, and I was like, okay. I tried playing. I started to sort of understand, you know, what was kind of going on.
Yeah, because there is a storyline. My understanding is that the kind of storyline is that there's the Scorch Beasts and somebody that's because it doesn't. It
The
takes
Scorch-
place
it's
2102.
25 years after.
So yeah, exactly 25 years after the bombs have dropped.
Yeah,
so
and
it's
so you've
fresh.
got, they're not quite ghouls, they're just like burned zombies.
Yeah, they're called
The Scorch.
the Scorch. Yeah.
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 Yeah, and there's a bunch of that. I never quite got into the full like, you know, end of the game. I
Right.
explored a bunch of the map, and there's some really neat locations there, and
Yeah, there's like the amusement park and
yeah,
stuff like that.
Is it
and-
a mining cave or a mining place where there's like a boss in there that's apparently really, really
You
difficult?
can
Yeah,
fight, you
and
can
there's
fight
a-
the Mothman.
there's a like
Yeah.
an alpine kind of lodge that was really cool, kind of up on one side of the map. Yeah, I did put a few hours into it, but I lost interest because there wasn't enough story for me to care.
Right.
And I didn't really like any of the online aspects of it. So it just, to me, it was like, okay, I would maybe play this if nobody else was playing,
right.
right? If it
Yeah.
was just me.
You could
in
play a
this
single
world.
player multiplayer.
Or
But
if,
then
if
the-
you
but
could
then-
have isolated servers where it's like only you and your friends. So
Right.
you can do that now. You can
Yeah? Oh.
you can put a server up.
So moving on, the next section I want to talk about the world a bit. So this section is called "The World" (bracket on fire). The first section, subsection I have here is talking about music, which we've done a bit, and I mean, I'll just make the statement again that the music in the game is just so amazing. I did also so in the world building, there's so many hidden stories, hidden missions, things like that. And we had talked off recording on the subject of music about the fact that you can kill Three Dog,
Yes.
and then it affects the world. In that
Right.
afterwards, when you're listening to the radio
He's
station,
not on the radio station
and
anymore.
aren't they like really bitter?
There's
Yeah,
so
he's
there's a
super mad
woman
about it.
who I don't think you can connect with. I don't think she exists as like somebody that you can
Yeah,
see in the world, but she'll kind of like put on records and just be like, this is I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire by the Ink Spots. 3 Dogs Dead. And then just like, just
Yeah. But things
she's
like that
she's
go
like
so
super,
far
yeah, and it's
in building that world.
in Fallout 4, there's a quest that you can. One of the bartenders in Diamond City thinks that the DJ doesn't have enough confidence, so he wants to fake a bar fight to boost his confidence.
Yeah, it's called the Con Man is the name of the mission.
Yeah,
The
confidence man. Yeah, and but I found that he's not as charming once he has his confidence.
Yeah, there was an interesting charm to him, like stuttering his way through.
I love it
because it was kind of like.
And now that I've realized that it's Brendan Hunt, I am.
We're listening to this next song. He's very much like that, and then afterwards, he's just kind of your typical kind of
radio DJ.
Yeah,
yeah.
No, but it's especially when he's talking about your events, and Three Dog does this as well. Where as you are going out and doing things in the world, he's reporting on the news of you having done those things. And Travis, the DJ in Fallout 4, does the same thing where he's just like, and the Vault Dweller was there, and
I actually don't remember at all what the DJ was for the New Vegas station.
That's Mr. Vegas.
Mr. Vegas,
played by Wayne Newton.
But I just don't remember what he even.
He's just got a really silky smooth voice, and
he's Wayne Newton.
He's Wayne Newton, and everything he does is just kind of like,
hey there, Vault Dwellers.
Silver Rush, like these little ads for the casinos and things like that. He's my favorite, I think, of all of them. But he's also Wayne Newton, so like it's a hard.
Other little things, so. You can spend hours and hours on the computers just reading all these amazing stories that they've created.
The in-game computers.
The in-game computers, sorry, yes. There's one in 4. I speak specifically to 4 because that's where most of my experience is, but where these 2 Bostonian brothers are kind of fighting with is Wicked Shipping Company. The Wicked Shipping Company.
Wicked smart.
But they type in Bostonian accents as well,
right.
So it's like smat and like things like that. So there's all that kind of stuff. There are the comic book collecting, Grognak, Silver Shroud.
So you can get Grognak's weapon.
Yeah, and it's those little bits that are so important to building that world and making it feel so
real
immersive
and
there's always something around the corner. You're like, oh, okay, I've put 100 hours into this, 1,000 hours into this, and I still found a thing that I didn't.
I mean, even if it's just like seeing, in the scene in the show where she goes in and you see the kitchen or the living room, and they've poisoned the family as this group, unlifing or whatever they call it now. And then there's a bullet in the brain of the last person, and so it's these little vignette scenes that you find all over.
Throughout, a bunch of posed skeletons that tell a story.
Yeah, totally. The environmental storytelling is one of the strongest things in the series.
Yeah.
My favorite moment, maybe in all of them, is in the Enclave base. You can sneak around, and you go under the mess hall, and the mess hall is a grate, like it's a grate floor, and under a bunch of forks. Because people keep dropping their forks through the holes in the floor, right under the mess hall.
Oh, see,
and it's like, and that's that little bit. That's so
wonderful.
Fallout, right? Because the Enclave are deeply serious, scary people, and there's this little goofy bunch of forks under the mess hall.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to talk about it specifically, but the moment for me that was like one of the most memorable,
right,
and really cemented. Not just that sort of, walking out of the vault was kind of like, oh, this is going to be a cool game. But like I'd been in, it might have even been my second or third playthrough of Fallout 3. Because you can play the whole game, feel very satisfied with like 100 hours.
Yeah.
And I've missed half of it.
Right.
And this might have been one of those things. And it adds absolutely nothing to the story. It's just a one-off thing. But there's a radio station, a very weak signal, so you can only pick it up within a very short radius from where it's originating. So if you happen to walk by this thing, there'll be a little thing that says there's a new radio station detected. You flip to it, and it's just this repeating message of this dad, and it's clearly from 2077 when the bombs are falling.
Oh, yeah.
And he's saying, like, it's just me and my son. He's injured or he's sick or something, and we've taken refuge in this little like culvert. You know, please come and help.
Is this
kind
4?
of thing.
You said
I think it's in 3.
3. Okay.
mean, maybe
there's
it's in
similar
4.
things in.
There are similar things, and so a couple things. It's 2077 when he's making the recording. It's 2277 when
Right.
you're playing. It's 200 years. They're dead. They're both dead. Even if they lived great long lives, they're just not there.
Right.
But you go and you find this little culvert, and you go in, and it's just a tiny little bit of sewer, and at the end of it, there's like a little cot, and there are 2 skeletons, and one is like an adult skeleton, one's like a child skeleton, and then there's like a pistol
Yeah.
on the like in the hand of or just like on the ground, and it's just sort of like
It's this grave reality of.
it's just sort of like
Yeah.
okay, like you know this guy set up this thing, and then like you could just like turn off that radio signal, and it's sort of like
God, man.
just,
you
you know,
just think about it right now.
yeah, it's just like
chilling.
it's just this chilling little like okay, like this
There are
whatever happened,
similar
they
stories
had
in
a whole
Thor.
story. You could have written an entire movie just about those
Totally.
2 hours that these guys
If
spent
they
in
did,
this
you know,
little
the
sewer or
Animatrix.
something. Totally,
So they could have
Little
done
short
a short
stories.
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would actually be an interesting.
absolutely,
Well,
and
let's see
there's
what happens with it.
you know there's stuff like that out there, like not official, you know. Where,
Yeah.
But that for me was just this moment of like, okay, like this has
It's
painted
not
that.
just jokes and,
No.
you know, there's some
And
real.
Todd
nice
Howard,
moments.
if you are listening, I liked what you tried to do with Starfield, but that's the kind of thing that was missing for me from that was those little moments that really made the world feel full.
I think I
and lived
feel
in.
like you probably see less of that in games now because you think about the creation of it. So you have to have the animators, or not animators, but the programmers to do that, write the story, record the vocals, and that's all stuff that's not pushing the story forward. But arguably, as you're saying, it is what kind of helps
It's
make
what
the game.
brings me back to those games, and
Yeah.
I think it pushes the story forward in a way that's less tangible because it's pushing the world forward, and it's
Yeah.
making you care
It's
about
things like that
what
that
happens in the world.
this is why the world is so great. Yeah.
This is and it makes you make decisions about the world and think about the world.
Speaking of decisions and the world, companions, of course, are a big thing. We've briefly talked about it here and there, but just having this person with you in 4, anyways. They change things in 4 where it's not about karma or anything like that.
It's about
You
how the
can-
companion thinks
Your
about
companion you can make fall in love with you, and then if they are in love with you and you sleep in a bed near them, you get the lover's
you.
embrace.
The lover's embrace. You don't actually even have to be. So we were talking about Linda Carter as Magnolia in Fallout 4.
Yep.
I happened to take a perk called Lady Killer, which gives you, I think, extra damage to the opposite sex.
Something
well,
like that. Well, there's what if you're the female,
if you're a female, you get a
it's
different
Black
option.
Widow,
Yes, that's
and
it.
then a Lady Killer.
And
for
so, but you also get extra dialogue, and women are easier to persuade.
yes.
And I had that, and I just, I was in the, I want to call it the Third Rail, is the bar in Good Neighbor that she sings at.
Maybe.
And
That sounds right.
She's a lounge singer, classic,
Yeah.
red sequin dress, and
Yeah.
she's also got the least janky facial texture of anyone in the game. I think, like they
Least
really,
janky.
they really tried to
It's a
make
badge
her
of honor.
attractive.
Yeah.
And she's got a very sexy voice and stuff, and just trying to get some information out of her. But there's like an option that's just flirt, and then you hit that, and then there's flirt more, flirt even more, and you just like I'll just
remember
see
that.
how far this goes, and then it's like it just like you say something, the lights go down, and then the lights come up, and you're in like a hotel room, and she's just sort of like, thanks for that. It's been a while since blah blah blah, but like. I'm married to the stage. Like she's kind of just sort of like, you knew what this was, guy.
Yeah.
Which is, but up in the corner, lover's embrace.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. I don't know if I've actually accomplished that.
I hadn't until recently. I just don't think I ever bothered.
I should actually mention too. It doesn't matter, and I found this fascinating. I love it. It doesn't matter if you choose the male character or the female character in Fallout 4. You can no matter the sex of the companion, you can be in love with them, which I love.
Right.
Because what is it? Tim
Kaine
Kaine is openly
Yep.
gay, and there are gay
Producer of
companions
Fallout
and-
1 and 2.
Yeah, so I thought that was a nice touch as well. It doesn't really matter.
I feel like Mass Effect did that.
That's a big game.
Mass Effect is one of the biggest games that did it.
One of the and honestly, from a technological point of view, it's easier to just let anyone
Of course,
connect with
it's
anyone, right?
definitely
It's just sort of
easier,
like, oh, I don't have to have like some weird thing that checks if you're this and they're that, and like it's just sort of like, it's just, but like it was one of those things that I think maybe even not maliciously, but people were just sort of like, oh, a man can only connect with a woman, just sort of without thinking about it from a broader perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm glad that that's just an option. The only thing, I don't think you can fall in love with Nick Valentine, who's like my favorite companion, because he's not human.
No, he's not human. Well, dog meat obviously can't.
So one of the mods that I play with is a mod that lets you have dog meat and a companion.
Ooh.
And that I don't play with a lot of mods because I like the game kind of as it is, but that one allows you to have Nick and dog meat.
Nick is, I would argue, one of actually the card that represents Nick in the deck is legendary human. And at first I was like, oh, I should find a robot, and I was like, I would argue that Nick Valentine is more human than a lot of the characters out there.
So I mean, you talked about kind of getting into role playing your superhero-y kind of guys and stuff.
Yeah.
My the current playthrough where I'm kind of a misanthrope, where I just don't really like other humans.
Right.
I think in my guy's mind, he is a little bit of a robot.
Okay.
Because he seems to like all of the robot NPCs and companions he has. I have the ability to build other robots. So like my farm is being tended by just robots that I've built and all of this kind of stuff. So I like the idea of potentially falling in love with another robot, but I don't think I'm sure there's a mod out there that lets that happen.
Now we talked about the arcade games and stuff like that, but there are also a bunch of other mini games in the game. So like hacking and lockpicking. In New Vegas, there's gambling, and there's also a game called Caravan.
Yeah, which
it's kind of a proto deck building game. Like you go around.
What was the one in The Witcher? What was that called?
Gwent.
Yeah. Is it kind of like that?
So you go around and find like cards around the world to build a better deck, so you can play the game more effectively. I played very little of it because it's like a whole separate thing you have to do that isn't necessary.
I found it difficult to understand what to do to win.
I also just wanted to go.
But if you have high luck, it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, you just have high luck.
But the rules that are like, you find playing cards, like standard American playing cards out in the world,
but they're missing.
But they can be missing this or that, and they all have different backs from like the different casinos and stuff like that. And the caravan traders in the world have started playing this game where they're trading with each other, and a little bit like how Pogs used to be both a collectible thing, but also something that you could like gamble the actual Pogs, like or marbles or whatever. This is sort of where you're playing with these decks, but you can also lose cards to other people or gain cards from them. But you can't have two of the same card with the same backing. So you have this big mixed deck, but it's a really great way of like, we're dealing with what we have, right? There are no card manufacturers out there anymore. So we only have the supply that exists in the world. And some of them are burnt and some of them are from this place or that place or whatever. And you're kind of building your deck, but it is a deck building game in the game. But I never quite understood how to play it.
I need to play 3 in New Vegas.
There is
you can probably skip 3, honestly.
Yeah, I would play 3.
I love 3. 3. I love 3. I don't hate 3. 3 is the game I played and I love. But
if you're ever going to play 3, play it before you play New Vegas.
Okay,
not for any story reasons, but it is frustrating.
It's hard to go back.
Right. And New Vegas improves on a few of the
wasn't there some like stuff with like inventory management going into lockers? You had to like go in and.
I think that's true in both of them, where you have to like open up the thing and like take things out. I mean, we were even watching before we started recording the Fallout 1.
Yeah.
You had to like manually drag things and then like click a little like counter to say how many of the thing you wanted to take. And there's no like take all and stuff. So each game improves on that, but If you're not like a hoarder, which I tend to be in those
everyone
I
games.
plays
collect
those games.
skulls. That's my favorite thing.
I collect teddy bears.
Yeah, the teddy bears is good too. I wanna collect teddy bears to shoot out of my junk.
I
jet.
gave Dog Meat a bunch of junk, including a teddy bear.
Oh, and he pulls
and
it out.
he pulls it out and starts shaking
Yeah, he
it. And
starts
I was like,
shaking it
I
around.
never noticed that.
I had this back to glitches. I had a bathtub full of human skulls,
Sure, we all do.
as we do.
Yeah.
And I put it on the second floor of my house because I didn't want somebody to stumble upon my secret
I
bathtub
think
of
you told
skulls.
me about this once.
And the purpose of
The
the bathtub
yeah.
is for Brahmin to
the
drink
feeding
water out of.
trough for the Brahmin.
So I would go up to place my newly
Acquired
skulls in the bathtub, and there's this Brahmin on the second floor. I would have to remove a wall and like basically try and push this Brahmin
Yeah.
out onto the street again. Yeah, that was a fun glitch. The last thing I wanted to talk about on kind of the world was this 40s, 50s aesthetic,
Mhm.
which plays such a huge part in it. Jeff, I know you're a huge fan of that.
I like the aesthetic in general. Like,
Yeah.
I like
Outside
absolutely.
of Fallout, you love that aesthetic.
It's a the atomic era, the space race, like all the cars have like fins and stuff, and I
Yeah.
think the in-world explanation is they were able to harness atomic energy in the way that I think everyone in the 50s thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like everyone in
Yeah.
our 1950s
Yeah,
thought was going to happen.
The reality in Fallout is the future that
That we
people in the 50s thought
Yeah.
everything would look like.
And so I love that retrofuturism because I think there's a lot that we can learn about how people then thought now was going to be,
Right,
and how that can inform how we think now the future is going to be.
right.
But I also like that aesthetic also, but also in the world, they never invented the transistor. So everything is still valve.
That's the big thing.
And so that's why, they're like computers,
because
they've got-
they focus more on nuclear power.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like the computers are still these like old school computers,
Yeah.
but then the all these weapons and
Well, you
all
have these
power
floating
armor and stuff.
robots and yeah.
But it's all it's solid state valve, kind of stuff. So
Well, and I also will segue this into the next section, which is
speaking of segues,
yeah, which is the best segue always. The future of the future that is Fallout. So this is, I just want to briefly, before we wrap up, talk about the show a bit more. I mean, we have peppered it through, but interesting thing on that the show has introduced us to is, and this is a big spoiler alert for people because we are specifically going to be talking about the show here. If you haven't seen the show, the flashbacks to the past. So they're giving us this glimpse into what the actual world was like actually before the bombs dropped.
right?
I mean, it's pretty well hinted and documented throughout all the games, but this is like a first-hand look.
And Fallout 4 starts with
yes, very
a
briefly,
minute
that's
or
very-
two
yeah,
of that world.
And in 3 Operation Anchorage, you
Operation
play
Anchorage,
you
yep.
play
Oh, that's
a
right.
virtual of going back to the Anchorage War.
and there's also there's a mad doctor.
there's a
in
mad
3.
doctor that puts you in a black and white kind of Pleasantville
Yeah.
type thing.
Tranquility
Tranquility Lane, where it's
Lane.
just like this like cul-de-sac that's
Cul-de-sac.
just a loop.
but
that
but
you
even
can't
that
get out
is
of.
like the idealized version of
Yeah.
the idealized.
Yeah, it's the real
version.
Leave It to Beaver style
Yeah.
kind of 1950s America. But
So the series set in 2296, so it's 9 years after Fallout 4. There are some. I'll say this overall, love it. I think it's an amazing show. I think it services the fan base fairly well, I would say. There are some things about it that I'm like, okay. What did you guys think of the show? You guys have both watched the season 1.
I mean, Vault Boy thumbs up for me. I was
Cooper thumbs up.
I was worried, as like other than The Last of Us, and maybe things have changed a little bit because we had kind of a successful Mario Brothers movie
Right.
and Sonic movie, but up until a few years ago, video game adaptations have sucked.
Well, because they
almost
were almost
unilaterally.
always like, oh yeah, I guess that's what the story is, but I'm gonna do my thing.
And we could have a whole podcast episode
Sure.
where we talk about that because
You know,
I have
like
opinions on that.
the Hitman movie and the Postal movie.
Oh, Mortal
Totally, but,
Kombat
like,
movies.
The Mortal Kombat movie, the
Wait, Mortal Kombat 1, that movie rules.
that movie is actually pretty good, and that was actually one of the better ones. And that's
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 where
true.
we're
They're
at.
not going with a strong storyline.
But Last of Us was fantastic.
Yeah.
But it was basically just the game.
Yeah.
Like beat for beat. This was none of this ever happened in a game that we played, but all of the things from the game, the spirit of the game, I think was well infused in this. And they made a couple of decisions that I was like, okay, like they really get into some stuff around Vault Tech that Josh, you really liked. I think real spoilers for the show.
Yeah.
Even if you're watching the show, like don't listen to this
Don't
next
listen
part.
to this next part.
But like how Vault Tech was sort of pulling the strings,
Yeah, I thought
And
it was
dropping
cool.
the bombs.
and
Obviously the narrative that it's a real 1984 it's this eternal war that's going on, someone else is doing it, but no, it's the boys at home
and so
pulling the strings.
War. What is it? What was the apocalypse as a product? Was
Yeah,
like a
they
running
did.
theme?
Yeah.
Of it? Sorry.
so my thoughts on that are from in a vacuum point of view, great. And Amanda, who I was watching it with, she called that. She was like, I bet you it's these guys. And I was like, no, that's not who Vault Tech is.
Right.
And so that was where, for me, it shifted kind of what Vault Tech had been sort of set up to be. And in my view, and this is really just my, they were always a little shady, but it was just kind of like small scale shady where they're like, okay, we'll just have a bunch of people that we're going to experiment on, but like never
We'll
quite
make these people think they have to kill somebody
yeah,
every year.
but like a lot of the vaults were like legit, like, oh, we're just going to,
Right.
they're capitalizing on the war, but they're not creating the war.
Mhm.
They don't have these, designs on,
So
world
yeah,
domination.
this is a huge new canon.
Yeah, and I think it's
Change.
I think it's the sort of post 9/11 kind of
Inside
conspiracy
job thing,
inside
yeah.
job kind of thing, whereas the 90s, the original, kind of like Vault Tech was the idea of like, okay, just like war profiteering, right? Like, and
Yep.
all of those big, Robco and West Tech and Vault Tech and all of those in-game corporations are just military industrial complex, but they're not necessarily manufacturing the war.
Right.
And like, maybe that was a naive view, and maybe the reality is like these,
Mhm.
arms, manufacturers are actually manufacturing
I will be.
wars and stuff like that. So it works in a modern context. I think it works absolutely, but it changed how like
It does. It does change. I don't think.
I
it
never thought
doesn't-
of Vault Tech as the bad guy.
Well, they and in doing so, they didn't actually have to change anything. They didn't retcon anything. They're just adding this
They're
new
just
layer.
adding some stuff. Yeah.
So I'll be curious to see how it does play out. Now, one thing that they did change that I thought was interesting, I didn't mind it so much. I kind of wish they didn't, but is the ghouls and how ghouls work.
That's the thing I think I least enjoy.
Yeah, like,
Right.
because
I don't like
they
how
have
ghouls
it
have
so essentially the spoilers for halfway through the season for people here. You can be turned into a ghoul by some injection apparently. B, if you're a ghoul and you don't take a certain medication, you will turn into a feral ghoul.
Right.
And that was never so ghouls were created by the bombs. That's what
It's
how
radiation.
it was.
It's
Yeah.
purely radiation. Yeah.
And you were either a feral one or not. You didn't turn in. You
You-
didn't go from a sentient one to a feral ghoul.
you could.
Oh, you could.
You could. It was something that would have happened. I think the in-world explanation was these were all people that at some point were sentient ghouls,
Oh,
and that they would often band together, and the isolation from humanity, non-ghouls, they would all kind of
That's
just
very
like kind of
interesting.
lose that humanity. But also, like, as your brain rotted the same way that your skin and other organs would rot, that was kind of what turned you into a feral ghoul, was that your brain was kind of suffering from that.
Well, that's nice.
I think, yeah. So,
if that's the case, that's.
but there
nicer
was
for
never
me.
like I just need this injection. I think that's a fun little like ticking clock. There's some stakes for.
Well, yeah. The whole
for the
plot
ghoul.
hole for me is that when the bombs dropped, how long is it going to take to make that medication, and how many
Right.
ghouls would have? There would be no more.
Because
Right.
like in
Sentient
3 in New
ghouls.
Vegas, there's a lot of ghouls who
There are
have been
a
around
lot
for,
of ghouls in
for
3 in
hundreds of
Vegas,
years.
Yeah,
right?
and
it's-
some of them are pre-war. You run into the Vault Tech guy in Fallout 4.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Who's actually one of my favorite, like most sympathetic. Just the way that his face is animated when you talk to him. He's so sad.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of be like, you can go and live at Sanctuary, and he's like, I can. And he's so like,
place for me?
yeah. It's just sort of like,
Yeah.
that part is always really sweet.
That was really.
But yeah, no, ghouls less in Fallout 4.
I mean, they're definitely there.
They're there,
Well,
but they're
the feral
like,
ghouls
Fallout
are
3.
everywhere,
They're like,
they're everywhere.
you run into like yeah.
There's some major characters that are ghouls, like Hancock.
Hancock,
is a
yeah.
good one,
A lot of scientist ghouls in 3.
yeah, yeah.
Like ones who I
Yeah.
forget one of them the Jefferson Memorial. One of the memorials. There's like a bunch of scientist ghouls who are
Yeah.
running stuff. I can't remember.
But yeah, I'm excited to see what it's been signed on for season 2. So I'm
they
excited
really
to see
they were
They've
like
got a
they
lot-
knew the way they set up the final episode.
One thing that I noticed, and I don't know if this is a thing or not. So Bethesda, as we talked about, 2 hours ago now, took over and started doing 3 and 4, and they changed a little bit. And they took the series out east where they were from, and that's sort of under the sort of Todd Howard universe of Fallout.
Mhm.
And 1, 2, and then the teams behind that created New Vegas, which were all sort of on the west.
Yeah.
And I thought that this sort of new one that was produced by Todd Howard, and I don't know how much input he had into the story or anything, but they had in canon destroyed Shady Sands, which was a major settlement from
absolutely destroyed.
from the first one, and then at real spoiler for the absolute last moment of the show,
Mhm.
the first season, is we see New Vegas, but it seems to be in disrepair.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like middle fingers from Todd sort of saying all of the things that the team that wasn't
Well-
me created are destroyed.
Well, so I watched that interview that I watched with, it was him,
Todd
Howard,
Yeah.
and the director.
Jonathan Nolan? Probably.
Yes, he did Westworld.
Westworld.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the things that they reiterated a few times was that they were very cautious about canon and timelines. They didn't want to. They wanted to avoid any retconning. So they had to do a lot of study into like, okay, we can destroy Sadie Sands, but it has to be like based around these parameters and
Right.
stuff. So they were very careful with that. So.
No, and it was just a little thing to notice. The one thing about destroying Shady Sands that I will say is the NCR plays a pretty big role in New Vegas.
Mhm.
And the game New Vegas would take place not long after the destruction of Shady Sands. And not one person mentions it.
Right.
And I feel like that would have been a thing that, obviously they didn't know that they were going to go that
Right,
route
of
then
course,
and
yeah.
blah, blah, blah. But that's like a thing that like nobody mentions it. In New
Yeah.
Vegas, so like they could have done the timing slightly differently, but
Yeah.
They got their hands full in New Vegas with Caesar.
absolutely. Yeah. No,
They're
they've
busy.
got some other things going on for sure.
But yeah, things to look forward to. Season 2, eventually Fallout 5, and I'm interested to see how the new developments that the show comes out with play into the game.
Todd Howard, if you're listening,
Which he is.
Obviously,
and if you're basing a major video game franchise on my opinions, which great,
sounds
thank
right.
you.
Sounds good.
As you should.
I would love to be able to play more than just a human. Give me an option to play
yeah.
as a ghoul or a super mutant or a synth.
Dog.
Yep, play the whole game as a dog.
Oh my god, the
Ba-
whole game you're dog.
You
meat.
are dog meat. Fallout dog meat. Let's do
dog
it, guys.
fall.
Dog fall. Yep.
Fall out. Wait.
You don't need to.
Dog out.
You don't need to.
Dog meat out.
Yeah, it
Out
doesn't-
meat.
Dog
yeah,
fall meat.
Out meat.
Out meat. All right, I'll see you guys when we play Out Meat. Anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Stay tuned for more. And yeah, I'll put a bunch of links to the deck down below in the show notes, as well as some of the source material that we got this from. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Josh, for joining us.
Of course.
Thank you, Jeff.
Gary.
Gary.
Haha,
And thank
Gary.
you, me, Gary. Take care, everybody. Dogfall.
I can't remember that new James Bond.
Meat dog. Dog meat. Oh, wait, that's his name.
Let the dog fall.
This is the Deckumentary Podcast, a Magic the Gathering broadcast. Definitive